Chapter 25:15. Chapter 25:15. Chapter 25:15 Genius Competition. The scene that suddenly happened on the Heaven Ascension Dao platform stunned everyone. Everyone's expression was dull, stiff, and shocked. Countless eyes widened, looking at the Sky Ascension platform in disbelief. Kuei Mu Jingchen's speed was too fast, as if the Sky Ascension platform had no effect on him. Stepping on the platform was like walking on flat ground. How is this possible? How can this guy's speed be so fast? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Who is he? Why haven't I seen him before? He's not from the main sect. Is he from the branch sect? He seems to be from the first sect, called Kuei Mu Jingchen, the son of the first sect master. The crowd reacted and discussed in shock. The horror in their hearts was written on their faces. The talent shown by Kuei Mu Jingchen was so amazing that people couldn't help but be shocked. At this time, even Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and others were completely shocked. Su Qianfan's speed was already fast enough, but in front of Kuei Mu Jingchen, it was like the speed of a tortoise. At this time, people knew that Kuei Mu Jingchen, who had been hiding, was the most talented person. Give me a shock. Kuei Mu Jun looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and the others, the corner of his mouth twitched, and he laughed sinisterly in his heart. But the more shocking thing is yet to come. Just when everyone was shocked, Kuei Mu Jingchen's figure had surpassed Su Qianfan. He took a steady step out, and his feet directly landed on the second step of the heaven stairway. At this moment, the Sky Ascension platform shook slightly, and then a muffled sound came out. A mighty force appeared, extremely strange, and pressed towards Kuei Mu Jingchen from all directions. Kuei Mu Jingchen's figure was like a mountain, standing there, and his whole body seemed to grow in the same place, motionless. Steady, steady, steady. The crowd saw this scene, their voices trembled, and their expressions were even more shocked. Kuei Mu Jingchen was too terrifying. With one step, he actually stabilized on the second step of the heaven stairway. Next, as long as he could walk through the second step of the heaven stairway and set foot on the third step of the heaven stairway, he could trigger the legendary resonance of heaven. This guy, how could he? Su Qianfan looked up at Kuei Mu Jingchen's figure. His handsome face stiffened, and he couldn't speak. He initially thought that his innate talent was already the strongest in the 10,000-layer mountain sect, but he did not expect Kuei Mu Jingchen's innate talent to be so much higher than his. The second level of the heaven stairway. Outside the Sky Ascension Square, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's face sank slightly when he saw Kuei Mu Jingchen fall on the second level of the heaven stairway. Kuei Mu Jingchen set foot on the second level of the heaven stairway, and he was only one level away from the third level of the heaven stairway that triggered the resonance of heaven. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 hoped that someone could trigger heaven's resonance, but he definitely did not want the person to be from the Kuei Mu family. Everyone in the 10,000-weight mountain sect knew that the Purple Bamboo family and the Kuei Mu family were opposing families. There was a strong competitive relationship between the two families. Even though the Purple Bamboo Wolf had become the master of the main sect, it was still wary of the Kuei Mu family. Moreover, everyone knew that the Kuei Mu army had coveted the position of sect master for a long time. If Kuei Mu Jingchen really triggered heaven's resonance, then the reputation of the Kuei Mu family in the entire 10,000-weight mountain sect would undoubtedly be greatly improved. This was not a good thing for the Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. "Nie Tian, are you still not going to make a move?" On the other side, Purple Bamboo Mist looked at Nie Tian with her beautiful eyes flickering slightly as she murmured. Now that Su Qianfan could no longer be compared with Kuei Mu Jingchen, the only person who had a chance to compete with Kuei Mu Jingchen was Nie Tian. As soon as Purple Bamboo Mist's voice fell, Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing moved at the same time. The two were very fast and instantly landed on the first level of the heaven stairway. The moment he stepped on the platform, Nie Tian felt an invisible force appear and shroud his whole body, making him unable to dodge and could only endure it. However, this invisible pressure was not strong, so both he and Jun Aoqing could withstand it. Go! Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing looked at each other and spat out a word at the same time. Then, they directly rushed to the top. The crowd looked at the figures of Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing and frowned. They said in shock, "Their speed is so fast." Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing's speed was indeed very fast. In the blink of an eye, they had already set foot on the 4th level. However, their speed was still slower than Kuei Mu Jingchen's. Everyone's eyes kept flickering as if they were looking forward to something. Next, Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing were very stable and soon set foot on the 7th level, which was the first level of the Heaven Stairway. They have also caught up. When Su Qianfan saw that Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing were already standing on the same level as him, he could not help but frown in surprise. He had originally thought that his talent was the strongest on this path to heaven. However, he did not expect that hidden geniuses would appear one after another. "Kid, it turns out to be you." At this moment, Kuei Mu Jingchen looked down and stared at Nie Tian with a pair of deep eyes. He said coldly, "Your talent is not bad, but it's impossible for you to catch up with me." After that, Kuei Mu Jingchen took a step forward and continued to climb up the stairs. After entering the 8th level, his speed slowed down a lot, but it was still very stable, rising step by step. In the face of Kuei Mu Jingchen's provocation, Nie Tian just smiled and did not say much. At this moment, all the onlookers were stunned. This time, the Heaven Stairway was really beyond everyone's expectations. There were so many geniuses appearing at once. At this moment, on the Heaven Stairway, there were 5 most eye-catching figures. Kuei Mu Jingchen on the 8th level, Su Qianfan, Yuji Wushuang, Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing on the 7th level. These 5 people had all set foot on the Heaven Stairway, which was simply impossible in the previous Heaven Stairway. In the previous Heaven Stairway, it was already good enough for a few martial artists to set foot on the Earth Stairway. But this time, there were as many as 5 martial artists who set foot on the Heaven Stairway alone. However, among these 5 people, 3 were from the 7th sect: Nie Tian, Jun Aoqing and Yuji Wushuang. Next, the figures of Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing continued to climb up. Soon, the two surpassed Su Qianfan and Yuji Wushuang at the same time and came to the top of the 7th level. The 8th level. Nie Tian smiled slightly, and his expression was still relaxed. But at this time, Jun Aoqing was slightly panting. Compared to Nie Tian, Jun Aoqing, who had the nether ghost vein, was still a little less talented. "Aoqing, how are you?" Nie Tian was a little worried about Jun Aoqing and couldn't help but ask. At this moment they were on the Heaven Stairway. If they reached the limit of their talent, they must not force it. Otherwise, the pressure on the Heaven Stairway was not a joke. "I'm fine." Jun Aoqing wiped the sweat on her forehead and nodded slightly. Nie Tian sensed the state of Jun Aoqing and was relieved to make sure that the latter was fine. Then, the two took a step at the same time and landed on the 8th level. Chapter 25:16. Chapter 25:16. Chapter 25:16. Strange Power. Boom. The terrifying pressure of the ascending heaven platform fell, and Nie Tian suddenly felt the terrible power, causing his body to shake slightly. Crack, crack, crack. Immediately, there was a crisp sound in his body, which was caused by the compression of his bones. What a strong pressure! Nie Tian frowned slightly. He felt an invisible force enveloping his body and squeezing the inside of his body, as if it wanted to crush his whole body into meat powder. However, his martial body was extremely strong. He forcefully resisted the power of the pressure and stood steadily. Beside Nie Tian, Jun Aoqing's little face was extremely painful, but she finally stood still. Stop! When the crowd saw the scene on the ascending heaven platform, their eyes trembled violently, and they couldn't help but shout. Nie Tian and Jun Ouching stood on the 8th step at the same time, which was a very rare scene. Together with Kuei Mu Jingchen before, there were a total of 3 martial artists who set foot on the 8th step this time, which was really shocking. Outside the ascending heaven square, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's gloomy face eased a little, but he was still very nervous and didn't dare to relax. Although Nie Tian and Jun Ouching climbed the 8th step at the same time, it was very difficult for them, far from as easy as Kuei Mu Jingchen. However, at this moment, Kuei Mu Jingchen's face was very ugly. A pair of eyes stared at Nie Tian like a vicious wolf, and he said solemnly, "It turns out that this brat's talent is so strong, no wonder Kuei Mu Rei was not his opponent before." Steadily on the 8th step, the figures of Nie Tian and Jun Ouching did not stop, but continued to climb up. Stepping on the 8th step, Nie Tian felt a very strong pressure. The omnipresent pressure made him unable to avoid it. He could only bear it. At this time, the figure of Kuei Mu Jingchen had reached the top of the 8th step, only 1 step away from setting foot on the 9th step. Is this guy's talent really so strong? Nie Tian looked at Kuei Mu Jingchen's figure, and he couldn't help but frown. Kuei Mu Jingchen seemed to be walking very easily, which made Nie Tian feel very strange. In his opinion, Kuei Mu Jingchen's talent should not be so strong. Look, Kuei Mu Jingchen is about to set foot on the 9th floor, and he is about to trigger the resonance of heaven. The crowd looked at Kuei Mu Jingchen's figure, and their blood couldn't help but boil. Heaven's resonance, the legendary Heaven's resonance, what would it be like? The 10,000-weight mountain sect had been established for more than 1,000,000 years, but there had never been anyone who could resonate with the heavens. Therefore, in everyone's eyes, Heaven's resonance was like a distant legend. They had only heard of it but had never seen it before. Heaven Ascension Platform, my next step is to make this world tremble for me. At this moment, Kuei Mu Jingchen's voice resounded on the Heaven Ascension Platform. Boom! The next moment, his figure moved, and he took a step forward. The entire Heaven Ascension Platform suddenly shook violently, and a violent and boundless force appeared, turning into boundless pressure that pressed on Kuei Mu Jingchen. At this moment, Kuei Mu Jingchen's body released a layer of halo that enveloped his whole body. The next moment, a strange scene happened. The endless pressure fell on Kuei Mu Jingchen's body, but it was absorbed by the strange halo around him and disappeared. At the same time, the Heaven Ascension Platform returned to calmness, and Kuei Mu Jingchen's figure stood firmly on the 9th step. At this moment, the halo around his body suddenly dispersed, and it turned into a violent wild beast phantom, dissipating in the space. His body released an aura like that of heaven and earth, as if he had integrated with this world and become the ruler of this world. Stop, stop. Kuei Mu Jingchen has set foot on the 9th floor. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and the shock in their hearts couldn't be any more. No one thought that Kuei Mu Jingchen could set foot on the 9th floor so easily. The 9th level was something that could trigger the resonance of the heavens. At this instant, everyone's expressions froze, and they stared blankly at the Heaven Ascension Platform as if they were anticipating something. But to everyone's disappointment, nothing happened. The Heaven Ascension Platform was silent, and there was nothing unusual. What's going on? Kuei Mu Jingchen was surprised, and his eyes trembled violently. His face was very ugly, like a fierce beast that was about to go crazy. He set foot on the 9th floor. Why didn't he trigger Heaven Resonance? Hey! Where's Heaven Resonance? Why didn't it happen? At this time, everyone was also shocked, not knowing what was going on in front of them. When a martial artist set foot on the 3rd step of the Heaven Stairway, he could trigger Heaven Resonance of the Heaven Ascension Platform, but now why was it quiet? The legendary Heaven Resonance didn't happen? At this time, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and others were also stunned. Was the record of the 10,000-weight mountain sect about the Heaven Ascension Platform wrong? Master, what's going on? Someone couldn't help but ask Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was also stunned, and he shook his head and said, I don't know what's going on either? Does a martial artist have to set foot on the last step of the 9th floor? Maybe so. Everyone really couldn't think of other possibilities, and they nodded. At the same time, on the Heaven Ascension platform, Nye Tian's eyes were fixed on Kuemu Jingchen, and his eyes were very puzzled. He was very close to Kuemu Jingchen, and he saw the scene just now very clearly. When the powerful pressure released by the platform appeared, it was actually absorbed by a layer of halo around Kuemu Jingchen's body. This was too strange. What kind of power was that layer of halo around Kuemu Jingchen? How could it be so powerful that it could absorb the pressure of the Heaven Ascension platform? Nye Tian believed that if it wasn't for this layer of halo, Kuemu Jingchen would not be able to set foot on the 9th floor. Nye Tian, what's wrong with you? Jun Aoqing saw Nye Tian's puzzled face, and she couldn't help but ask. I'm fine, let's continue to go up. Nye Tian smiled faintly, and didn't express the doubts in his heart. Fat Cat didn't speak at this time, and she probably didn't know what power Kuemu Jingchen used. Since I can't trigger the resonance of heaven on the first step of the 9th floor, then I will continue to go up. At this moment, Kuemu Jingchen calmed down, and his eyes were extremely firm. His figure moved, and he continued to climb up. But this time, his speed was much slower. The figures of Nye Tian and Jun Aoqing also walked up, gradually narrowing the gap between them and Kuemu Jingchen. When the crowd saw these three figures moving again, their eyes became scorching, still looking forward to the moment when the resonance of heaven was triggered. Soon, the figures of Nye Tian and Jun Aoqing came to the top of the 8th floor. The two glanced at each other, and stepped on the 9th floor at the same time. Boom! At the instant their figures landed, the Ascension Dao platform rumbled and let out a terrifying rumble. It was like the roar of the heavens. Chapter 25:17. Heavenly Sacred Heart. Is this heavenly resonance? Everyone stared at the sacred halos in the sky ascending square in awe as their voices trembled. No one had seen heavenly resonance before, so they could only guess. When Nye Tian and Jun Aoqing stepped onto the 9th step, they triggered the sky ascending platform and released a sacred halo. It looked like heavenly resonance. However, the sacred halo in the air quickly disappeared, and the sky ascending platform once again returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Nye Tian frowned, feeling a little strange. He felt that what happened just now was not heavenly resonant. If those holy halos were the heavenly resonance, then this so-called heavenly resonance was a little too weak. This is not heavenly resonance, definitely not. The crowd came to a realization and shook their heads. Although no one had seen heavenly resonance before, they all had their own imaginations. It must be an earth-shattering scene, and it would not be as calm as it was now. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and the others were dumbfounded. They did not know what was going on with the sky ascending platform. Why did the three of them fail to trigger heavenly resonance when they all stepped onto the 9th step? Continue. Seeing that the sky ascending platform had stabilized, Nye Tian smiled faintly and gazed higher. Next, he began to move up the stairs of the 9th step. On the 9th step of the sky ascending platform, the pressure in the space was extremely strong. Nye Tian felt that with every step he took, the bones in his body would make a crisp sound, as if they were about to crack from the pressure. Jun Aoqing's expression was even worse. Her petite face was tense, and blood was already seeping out from her lips. Aoqing, you're reaching your limit. Just stop here. Nye Tian could feel that Jun Aoqing's blood was circulating very quickly. It was obvious that her body was about to reach its limit, so he said hurriedly, I'm fine. Jun Aoqing, on the other hand, was very stubborn. Her delicate face was very firm as she said, Wherever you go, I will follow you. When Nye Tian heard Jun Aoqing's words, his eyes narrowed, and a warm feeling surged in his heart. However, he was still worried. After all, the ascending heaven platform was a mysterious thing. If something happened, it would not be a joke. Nye Tian, don't worry. June girl will be fine. But at this time, the fat cat's voice suddenly sounded. She has the nether ghost vein, and her body has also fused with the dragon spring vein. Even if she suffers the punishment of the ascending heaven platform, she will only be injured, she will not die. Yes. Hearing little fat cat's words, Nye Tian felt a lot more at ease. Nodding his head, he continued upwards. After a while, the distance between Nye Tian and Jun Aoqing and Kuemu Jingchen was very small, only a few dozen steps away. At this moment, Kuemu Jingchen had reached the top of the 9th floor. He was only a few steps away from reaching the last step. As the figures of Nye Tian and the others approached the top of the platform, the surrounding clouds dispersed and were replaced by a holy white light. What is that? The crowd looked at the center of the top of the platform, and their eyes trembled violently. It turned out that in the center of the platform there was a pure white ball of light floating. It was this ball of light that released the holy white light and dispelled the thick fog and dark clouds around it. The ball of light was not big, it seemed to be only the size of a normal person's heart, but it shone brightly, enveloping the surrounding void as if it could contain the world. If it weren't for Nye Tian and the others reaching this height, no one would know that there was such a holy object on the ascending heaven platform. Is this the legendary? At this moment, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 looked at the ball of light with a trembling expression. He was tongue-tied and couldn't say a word. Heavenly Tao Sacred Heart. On the other side, Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist cried out in shock, and her beautiful eyes froze. Heavenly Sacred Heart, that must be the Heavenly Sacred Heart. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's voice sounded at the same time. He was extremely surprised. Heavenly Sacred Heart, what is that? Everyone looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and asked in confusion. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's whole body trembled as he stared at the ball of light. After a full 10 seconds, he calmed down. After calming down, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 began to explain. According to the legend, the ascending heaven platform was formed by the souls of countless sages in the ancient times. And among those sages, the strongest few built a heaven and earth formation on the ascending heaven platform, called the Heavenly Sacred Heart Formation. The Heavenly Sacred Heart Formation can comprehend the heavenly Tao, absorb the souls of the sages, and condense the Sacred Heart. And what the heavenly Tao and the Sacred Heart fuse together is the Heavenly Sacred Heart. It is said that the Heavenly Sacred Heart transcends heaven and earth, and transcends the great Tao. There is a legend on the path to heaven that the Heavenly Sacred Heart won't appear easily. It will only appear when it meets the true Master. And the person who can possess the Heavenly Sacred Heart is the Master of the Heavenly Law, the Emperor who transcends heaven and earth. After Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 finished speaking, his eyes trembled as he stared at Nye Tian, Jun Aoqing, and Kuemu Jingchen in shock. The appearance of the Heavenly Sacred Heart meant that among Nye Tian and the other two, one of them was recognized as the Master of the Heavenly Sacred Heart. The Master of the Heavenly Law, the Emperor who transcends heaven and earth. After hearing Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's words, everyone's eyes were filled with shock, and most of their eyes were focused on Kuemu Jingchen. Kuemu Jingchen, is he the Master of the Heavenly Law recognized by the Heavenly Sacred Heart? An elder of the main sect couldn't help but exclaim. At this moment, the person closest to the Heavenly Sacred Heart was Kuemu Jingchen. Therefore, in the eyes of everyone, the possibility of him being the Master of the Heavenly Law was undoubtedly higher than that of Nye Tian and Jun Aoqing. Moreover, Kuemu Jingchen's performance after stepping on the ascending platform was obviously better than that of Nye Tian and Jun Aoqing. It must be Kuemu Jingchen. No wonder he stepped on the ascending platform so easily. It turns out that he is the legendary Master of the Heavenly Law. Another elder said, directly regarding Kuemu Jingchen as the Master of the Heavenly Law. My son is the master of the heavenly law." On the other side, Kuemu Jun's eyes were trembling, and he looked very excited. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's face was extremely embarrassed, and there was even a look of horror in his eyes. If Kuemu Jingchen was really the master of the heavenly law, then the entire Myriad Mountain sect would definitely stand on the side of the Kuemu family. At that time, it would be the doomsday of the Purple Bamboo family. At the same time, on the ascending platform, Nie Tian clearly heard everyone's conversation. His eyes were fixed on the heavenly Sacred Heart, and there was an unconcealable blazing intent in his eyes. The ascending platform was formed by the souls of countless saints, and the heavenly Sacred Heart was formed by comprehending the heavenly law, absorbing the souls, and then integrating them. Therefore, the heavenly Sacred Heart was absolutely the most sacred object, and it contained unimaginable power. "Boy, do you think you can win the heavenly Sacred Heart?" At this moment Kuemu Jingchen's voice sounded, and a pair of cold eyes stared at Nie Tian, and he said solemnly, "Only I, Kuemu Jingchen, am worthy to be the master of the heavenly law." Chapter 25:18. Chapter 25:18. Chapter 25:18 Vanishing Death. Seal on the sky ascending platform, Kuemu Jingchen forcibly took a few steps and came directly to the highest point of the sky ascending platform. At this time, he was only a few meters away from the heavenly Sacred Heart. As long as he stretched out his hand, he could take the heavenly Sacred Heart as his own. Kuemu Jingchen is about to get the heavenly Sacred Heart. Everyone's eyes suddenly trembled at this moment, staring at the sky ascending platform, even their breathing stopped. If Kuemu Jingchen was really the Lord of Heavenly Tao, then the next scene must be a shocking scene. On the sky ascending platform, Kuemu Jingchen's eyes trembled, the fiery intent in his eyes reached the extreme, his eyes staring at the heavenly Sacred Heart. "The heavenly Sacred Heart is mine, I want to be the Lord of Heavenly Tao," he shouted frantically in his heart, and he approached the heavenly Sacred Heart step by step. 1 step, 2 step, 3 step. The closer he was to the heavenly Sacred Heart, the more Kuemu Jingchen felt the boundless power, and the pressure he was under also reached an unimaginable level. His bones, his blood, and his meridians were all stirring restlessly in his body. This kind of feeling caused him to be in a state of near insanity. "The heavenly Sacred Heart is mine." The next moment the last step fell. Kuemu Jingchen spoke with difficulty, his hands stretched out at the same time, grabbing the heavenly Sacred Heart. Boom! However, at this moment, the heavenly Sacred Heart suddenly trembled, and then a majestic and boundless power was released. At this moment, Kuemu Jingchen's body trembled, and he could no longer bear the huge pressure. His whole body flew out like an arrow leaving the bow. Ah! The sudden scene made everyone's eyes tremble, and they all screamed. Kuemu Jingchen was already so close to the heavenly Sacred Heart, it was really close, but at the last moment, he still failed to get the heavenly Sacred Heart. Boom! At this moment, Kuemu Jingchen's figure suddenly released a layer of strange halo in midair, and it immediately stabilized him and stopped in midair. However, after he steadied himself, his expression was extremely ugly. His face was pale, and there was even a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Nie Tian's eyes widened in astonishment at the sight of this. He was very close to Kuemu Jingchen, and he could feel how strong the pressure released by the heavenly Sacred Heart was. It was enough to kill an immortal state peak expert in an instant. But Kuemu Jingchen was only injured, and he could stabilize his body and stay on the heaven ascension platform. It seemed that there was a very terrifying power in Kuemu Jingchen's body that could resist the pressure of the heavenly law Sacred Heart. "It's that layer of light." In the next moment, Nie Tian frowned and instantly confirmed that the reason why Kuemu Jingchen could resist the pressure of the heavenly law Sacred Heart was because of the strange halo around his body. "I got it!" Almost at the same time, The fat cat's excited voice rang out. Fat, what do you know? Nye Tion's eyes trembled, and he asked hurriedly. Nye Tion, the halo around this guy's body is a seal. Fat Cat said in a deep voice, looking very surprised. Seal. Nye Tion was stunned for a moment, and his face was filled with shock. What kind of seal is it? It's so powerful that it can resist the pressure of the heavenly law Sacred Heart. The fourth seal, Universal Annihilation Death Seal. Fat Cat said in a deep voice, and his pair of deep blue eyes trembled slightly. The fourth seal. When Nye Tion heard the voice of Fat Cat, his eyes trembled, and he almost screamed. He never thought that there was actually the fourth seal of the 10 strongest seals in Kuemu Jingchen's body. The reason why this guy can set foot on the 9th floor of the Heaven Ascension platform so quickly is not because of his peak talent, but because of the fourth seal. Fat Cat nodded and said, the Universal Annihilation Death Seal in his body has helped him resist at least half of the pressure. So the pressure he is under is only half of the pressure of others. In addition, his talent is not weak, so he can easily set foot on the 9th floor. So that's how it is. Nye Tion's eyes narrowed, and he finally understood. Previously, he felt that Kuemu Jingchen was not simple, but he did not expect this guy to be so strong that he actually has the fourth seal. How is this possible? At this moment, Kuemu Jingchen roared, a pair of eyes staring angrily at the voice of the heavenly law, and the aura of his body was slowly released. He originally thought that he was the owner of the heavenly law Sacred Heart, but he did not expect that the heavenly law Sacred Heart would not recognize him. Kuemu Jingchen is not the owner of the heavenly law Sacred Heart. Outside the ascending Heaven Dao platform, the crowd also reacted, exclaiming in surprise, at the same time shifting their gazes to Nye Tion and Jun Aoqing. Kuemu Jingchen failed, so the real master of the heavenly law must be either Nye Tion or Jun Aoqing. Is it that silver-haired boy? Immediately, everyone's eyes focused on Nye Tion. Because Jun Aoqing was a female martial artist, most people thought that the master of the heavenly law could not be a female. So at this moment, everyone thought that the person most likely to be the master of the heavenly law was Nye Tion. At this moment, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 let out a deep breath, and the tense expression on his face relaxed a lot. As long as Kuemu Jingchen was not the master of the heavenly law, he could accept it. It seems that the master of the heavenly law is Nye Tion. No wonder he can challenge a martial artist at the peak of the god state with the strength of a late-stage supreme god. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 locked his eyes on Nye Tion and thought to himself. Like everyone else, he also thought that Nye Tion would be the master of the heavenly law. On the other side, Kuemu Jun's face was completely different, and he was embarrassed. He had just firmly believed that Kuemu Jingchen was the master of the heavenly law, but the scene just now slapped him hard in the face. At this time, on the ascending heaven platform. Impossible! The master of the heavenly law must be me. It can only be me. Kuemu Jingchen's eyes trembled, and a pair of eyes stared at the voice of the heavenly law. His whole body suddenly released the momentum, and then he forcibly rushed towards the divine heart of the heavenly law. Bang! The next moment, a muffled sound came out, and Kuemu Jingchen's figure was once again sent flying. When his body stabilized, his whole body was already dripping with blood. This time, the pressure of the heavenly law he endured was stronger than before. If he forcibly rushed forward again, he was afraid that he would kill himself. Kuemu Jingchen, give up, you are not the master of the heavenly law, even if you force yourself, it is useless. At this time, Nye Tion's figure came to the platform, with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth, and he looked at Kuemu Jingchen sarcastically. You actually climbed up? Kuemu Jingchen looked at Nye Tion, his eyes trembled, and his face was very shocked. All his attention just now was on the divine heart of the heavenly law, and he did not notice that Nye Tion also came up. What made him even more shocked was that behind Nie Tian stood Jun Ouching. Both Nie Tian and Jun Ouching were on the platform. "I am not the master of the heavenly law, do you think you are?" The next moment, Kuemu Jingchen calmed down and said coldly, "Whether I am or not, we will know after we try." Nie Tian smiled faintly, and then his figure moved directly towards the divine heart of the heavenly law. Everyone outside the platform was shocked again, and they stared at Nie Tian, looking forward to the most exciting scene. The divine heart of the heavenly law recognized its master. This was definitely a shocking moment. Chapter 25:19. An anomaly outside the Sky Ascension platform. Countless gazes were fixed on the platform. Their eyes trembled violently, anticipating the most shocking scene. On the platform, Nie Tian's expression was calm, but his eyes were resolute. Rumble! He approached the heavenly sacred heart step by step, and as he got closer and closer, the entire Sky Ascension platform shook violently, as if it was about to collapse. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At the same time, the ball of light floating in the center of the platform spun rapidly, constantly emitting rays of holy light that formed a huge ripple of light in the void, spreading in all directions. The entire Sky Ascension platform, the entire Sky Ascension Square, and even the entire 10,000 mountains were enveloped by the holy light. In that instant, everyone felt a mysterious aura surging around them. It was as if the entire world had fallen silent. Everyone's gazes instantly became dull, their expressions intoxicated, as if they had fallen into a beautiful illusion, or a beautiful dream that they did not want to wake up from. What a mysterious aura! At this moment, Nie Tian felt a wave of holy and pure energy appear, as if it was surging out from within his body, causing his entire body to tremble. This aura was too strange, and Nie Tian found it hard to believe. But at this moment, the heavenly sacred heart ball suddenly emitted an ear-piercing sound, then stopped spinning. The holy light in the void abruptly stagnated, and in an instant, it turned into a boundless pressure. What's going on? Everyone woke up in an instant, their eyes trembling with shock as they shouted in a trembling voice, "Buzz!" But in the next moment, everyone felt a powerful pressure from the space. Suddenly, everyone's bodies were subjected to a terrifying force, as if it was pressing down on them from all directions. There was no way to dodge, they could only endure it. This power possessed boundless penetrative power, piercing through everyone's body. At this moment, everyone felt a powerful impact in their bodies. Their blood flowed in reverse, their meridians trembled, and their bones were squeezed. Puff! In an instant, everyone's bodies trembled, and they spat out mouthfuls of blood. Their faces turned as pale as paper. Even Purple Bamboo Wolf 7, who was a half-saint, could not resist this force. He vomited blood on the spot. Everyone's eyes were trembling. They had no idea what was going on. What's going on? At this moment, Nie Tian's expression was also extremely shocked. He felt a boundless pressure descend upon him, causing his body to feel like it was about to be torn apart in an instant. But in the next instant, that pressure disappeared. It was extremely strange. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Nie Tian froze on the spot with a stunned expression. Then, another strange scene occurred. The light sphere of the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart suddenly dimmed and instantly lost its luster, as if it had fallen into a dormant state. At the same time, the invisible pressure that shrouded the heavens and earth instantly disappeared. The mysterious aura in the air also disappeared. Nie Tian stared at the dim ball of light in front of him. He was even more stunned and speechless. What did the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart feel? Why was it so strange? First, it emitted holy light, then the holy light turned into pressure, and then it lost its luster. What did this series of events mean? Just as Nie Tian was in a daze, Fat Cat's voice suddenly rang out, screaming, "Nie Tian, hurry up and bring the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart over." Nie Tian suddenly came to a realization. His eyes focused, He took a step forward, and a ball of sword will gushed out of his palm. With a pull of his palm, the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart was pulled over. The dim ball of light did not react at all. It did not emit holy light, nor did it release any pressure. What the hell is going on? Nie Tian was shocked. He could not understand what was going on. The heavenly Tao Sacred Heart was very active just now. Why did it suddenly become quiet? It was as if it had completely given up resisting in the hands of Nie Tian. He got the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart. The crowd suddenly saw the scene on the Heaven Ascension platform and could not help but exclaim. No one thought that Nie Tian would get the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart so easily. But what was going on with this situation? Was Nie Tian the owner of the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart? If he was, why did the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart not recognize him as its owner and instead became dim? If not, why was he able to get the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart and not be rejected by the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart? What was happening in front of them was beyond everyone's expectations. No one could understand what was going on. Not to mention the others, even Nie Tian himself couldn't understand what was going on. Fat, what's going on? Nie Tian became cold. He looked at the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart in his hand and asked in confusion. Nie Tian, keep the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart first. I will explain everything to you later, Fat Cat said hurriedly, as if afraid that the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart would suddenly disappear. Okay. Nie Tian nodded. With a thought, the furnace of hell appeared in front of him, and he put the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart into it. When the crowd saw Nie Tian put the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart away, they could not help but tremble and look extremely shocked. The shocking scene they expected did not appear, but Nie Tian got the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart. This was too strange. Don't even think about it. However, at this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded. The next moment, Nie Tian felt a chill behind him, causing his eyes to instantly narrow. The heavenly Tao Sacred Heart is mine, no one can take it away. Immediately, a violent howl sounded in his ears. It was the voice of Kuemu Jingchen. Kuemu Jingchen was just beside him. How could he watch the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart be taken away? Nie Tian, be careful. At this moment, another voice sounded. It was Jun Ouching. Go to hell. At the same time, Kuemu Jingchen roared and slammed his palm. Suddenly, a layer of gray halo surged around his body and condensed into a death seal blade, attacking Nie Tian. At this moment, the distance between Nie Tian and Kuemu Jingchen was only 10 meters, which was a very dangerous distance. At such a close distance, even if Nie Tian had a fast reaction, he could not avoid it. In an instant, the death seal blade fell and was about to hit Nie Tian. But at this moment, a figure appeared like a ghost, blocking in front of Nie Tian's body, blocking the death seal blade for him. Jun Ouching! Nie Tian's eyes suddenly trembled and he exclaimed. That figure was none other than Jun Ouching. Puff! But the next moment, the death seal blade directly penetrated into Jun Ouching's body. Nie Tian. Jun Ouching's body trembled in the air, a pair of shining eyes glanced at Nie Tian, and they lost their luster in an instant. This death seal blade was condensed by Kuemu Jingchen using the power of the annihilation death seal in his body, and it contained the most terrifying death force. Chapter 25:20. Withering life. Jun Ouching shouted out Nie Tian's name with difficulty, but her eyes lost its luster in an instant, and she fell into a coma. Jun Ouching! The sudden scene made Nie Tian's pupils shrink. He stepped forward and held Jun Ouching in his arms. In an instant, he felt that the life force in Jun Ouching's body was rapidly fading, and her life force was rapidly weakening. Ah! Nie Tian roared furiously, suddenly looked up at Kuemu Jingchen with a pair of beast-like eyes, and roared. What did you do? Kuemu Jingchen looked at Nie Tian, but there was no fear. Instead, he smiled coldly and said, You are very lucky she blocked the fatal blow for you. But she was hit by my death seal and she will die. the death seal of all annihilation, the most terrifying death force, destroyed everything. At that moment, Kuemu Jingchen wanted to kill Nye Tian with the death seal blade. But he didn't expect that Jun Aoqing could react so quickly and block the death blow for Nye Tian. Son of a bitch! I will kill you! Nye Tian's eyes trembled violently, and the sword intent in his body rose. The blood qi around his body surged, and starlight heavenly slash appeared in his hand. He directly slashed out, and the mighty sword shadow struck straight at Kuemu Jingchen. But Kuemu Jingchen's reaction was very fast. His body moved, and he struck out with his palm, and the palm shadow surged out like a raging wave. Boom! The next moment, the sword shadow and the palm shadow collided, and the terrible power exploded instantly. Endless waves surged out, raging in the space. The figures of Nye Tian and Kuemu Jingchen retreated at the same time, and then stabilized at the same time. Nye Tian, do you think it's possible to kill me with your strength? Kuemu Jingchen stabilized his body and stared at Nye Tian coldly. Nye Tian's gaze was sharp and murderous. His eyes had turned crimson, and the sword intent in his body had reached its peak under the stimulation of his blood qi. Outside the Ascension Dao platform, everyone looked at Nye Tian and Kuemu Jingchen with shock. No one thought that Kuemu Jingchen would actually attack Nye Tian at that time. What was even more unexpected was that Jun Aoqing actually stepped forward to block the deadly blow for Nye Tian. At this moment, Nye Tian and Kuemu Jingchen were irreconcilable enemies. It was definitely a battle of life and death. Boom! However, at this moment, the entire Heaven Ascension Dao platform suddenly shook violently. Loud rumbling sounds rang out incessantly, as if the Heaven Ascension Dao platform was about to collapse. Time's up, the Heaven Ascension entrance is about to open, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 said in surprise when he saw this scene. It turned out that the path to heaven would only be open for an hour. After an hour, the path to heaven would close and the Heaven Ascension entrance would appear. Any martial artist above the third level of the Heaven Ascension Dao platform could enter the Heaven Ascension realm. I'll kill you! On the Heaven Ascension Dao platform, the anger in Nye Tian's eyes was violent to the extreme. He roared like a wild beast, and his figure moved in an instant, blasting towards Kuemu Jingchen. Nye Tian, let's fight again in the Heaven Ascension realm. Kuemu Jingchen sneered, blasted out a palm, and then his figure moved, avoiding Nye Tian's frontal attack. Obviously, he didn't want to fight with Nye Tian head-on. Just now, that death seal blade had consumed a lot of his strength. Moreover, the pressure from the heavenly law Sacred Heart also injured him. He felt that it was not a wise choice to fight with Nye Tian at this moment. He was ready to enter the Heaven Ascension realm, and after his strength was restored, he would fight with Nye Tian. Nye Tian's figure stabilized, and his eyes stared at Kuemu Jingchen. At this moment, he felt that Jun Aoqing's life aura was getting weaker and weaker, which made him calm down immediately. At this time, it was not the time to fight with Kuemu Jingchen, it was more important to save Jun Aoqing. Leave here. In the next moment, Nye Tian made a decision. The star soul wings appeared behind him, and his figure moved, wanting to leave the Heaven Ascension boundary formation. But at this moment, he suddenly felt an endless pressure appear, filling the entire Heaven Ascension boundary formation. At this moment, all the martial artists on the Heaven Ascension Dao platform also felt the endless pressure. Nye Tian was controlled by the pressure, and he couldn't move at all. He hugged Jun Aoqing tightly, and his eyes were abnormally firm. They are going to enter the Heaven Ascension realm. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's eyes trembled slightly when he saw this scene, and he said in horror. Just at the moment when his voice fell, the entire Heaven Ascension boundary formation shook and disappeared into thin air. Along with the Heaven Ascension boundary formation, the martial artists on the Heaven Ascension Dao platform also disappeared. Everyone looked at the empty Heaven Ascension Square with a shocked and sluggish expression. Everyone knew that Nye Tian and the others had entered the Heaven Ascension realm. But what happened on the Heaven Ascension Dao platform just now was beyond everyone's expectations. Everyone still didn't know whether Nye Tian was the legendary master of heavenly law or not. Also, Nye Tian and Kuemu Jingchen had entered the Heaven Ascension realm at the same time, and there would definitely be a battle of life and death between the two. Who would come out of the Heaven Ascension realm alive? At the same time, in the Heaven Ascension realm, Nye Tian hugged Jun Aoqing tightly. In just an instant, they had come to a completely unfamiliar world. At this moment, Nye Tian understood that the Heaven Ascension Dao platform was not only an ancient Dao platform, but it also contained the power of various boundaries, seals, and formations. At the same time, the Heaven Ascension Dao platform was also a space-time entrance that led to the Heaven Ascension realm in front of them. At this moment, Nye Tian held Jun Aoqing in his arms and stood in midair. Under their feet was a vast and boundless dense forest. Looking down from above, Nye Tian saw that the forest under his feet was boundlessly lush and flourishing as far as the eye could see. At this time, there was no one else around him. It seemed that everyone had been separated when they entered the Heaven Ascension realm. Jun Aoqing. Nye Tian didn't have time to observe too much. He suddenly looked down and saw that Jun Aoqing's body had undergone an extremely strange change. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he exclaimed in shock. He could feel that Jun Aoqing's life force was constantly fading, and her life aura was becoming weaker and weaker. However, this was not the worst. The worst thing was that Jun Aoqing's skin was slowly changing color, losing its luster, and turning into a deathly gray color, as if it was constantly withering. Nye Tian's eyes trembled, and he immediately released the power of the Terra Vein Source into Jun Aoqing's body. But the effect was very small, and Jun Aoqing's life aura was still rapidly weakening. What should we do? Nye Tian frowned, and his expression was solemn. Nye Tian, don't panic. At this time, Fat Cat's figure appeared and said, At this time, the more you panic, the more trouble it will be. Let's find a place first. I have to carefully examine Jun Aoqing's condition. Nye Tian nodded heavily, and then his figure moved, diving down into the forest below. He directly landed beside a small stream in the forest, and then he sensed the surroundings, and after confirming that there was no danger, he put Jun Aoqing down. Chapter 25-21. Chapter 25-21. Chapter 25-21. The Power of Annihilation. Nye Tian looked at Fat Cat and saw that the latter's face was getting more and more solemn and did not speak for a long time. He couldn't help but ask nervously, Fat, how is Aoqing? Her situation is very bad. Fat Cat said in a deep voice and did not explain too much. Instead, he said, I will bring her into the 9 Superbs first and explain to you later. With that, Fat Cat took Jun Aoqing and entered the 9 Superbs. Nye Tian did not follow them into the 9 Superbs but familiarized himself with the surrounding environment. This was the Heaven Ascension realm, which should be a different world, but the environment was similar to the outside world. However, the trees here were thicker and larger. The smaller trees were hundreds of meters high, and the bigger ones were thousands of meters high. There were even super-giant trees that were tens of thousands of meters high. Moreover, the space here was very rich with divine intent power, which was very suitable for cultivation. Previously, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 once said that the martial artists who set foot on the 3rd level of the human ladder could stay in the Heaven Ascension realm for 3 days, the martial artists who set foot on the Earth ladder could stay for 6 days, and the martial artists who set foot on the Heaven ladder could stay for 9 days. Nye Tian and Jun Aoqing had reached the top of the Heaven Ascension platform and could stay in the Heaven Ascension realm for at least 9 days. Now that Nye Tian was not in the mood to cultivate, he was wholeheartedly worried about Jun Aoqing's safety. Jun Aoqing became like this in order to save him. If something really happened to her, Nye Tian would not be able to rest in peace for the rest of his life. About half an hour later, Fat Cat came out of the Nine Superbs. "Fat, how is June Ouching?" Nye Tian asked anxiously when he saw Fat Cat come out. He could not hide the nervousness in his tone. "Nye Tian, you already know that Kuemu Jingchen is a martial artist with the fourth seal," Fat Cat said with a solemn expression. "What June Ouching was hit by is the annihilation power of the fourth seal, the annihilation death seal. This power is extremely terrifying. It can directly devour a martial artist's life force. If it's an ordinary martial artist, even a half-saint expert, so long as he's struck by the power of annihilation, he'll die instantly." When Nye Tian heard what Fat Cat said, his eyes narrowed and his heart sank. He didn't expect the power of annihilation to be so terrifying that even a half-saint couldn't resist it. "Nye Tian, it's fortunate that June Ouching blocked that attack for you. Otherwise, if you were hit, I'm afraid you'd be a corpse by now." Fat Cat looked at Nye Tian and said solemnly. Nye Tian's gaze sharpened again, saying solemnly, "Fatty, if even I can't resist the power of total annihilation, how could Ouching possibly still be alive?" June Ouching's martial body was far inferior to Nye Tian's. If even Nye Tian couldn't resist the power of total annihilation, how could June Ouching survive until now? Fat Cat's dark blue eyes narrowed slightly, saying, "June Ouching's nether ghost vein has a strong resistance against the power of total annihilation. Moreover, she has merged with the dragon spring vein, which is why she can last until now." "So that's how it is." Nye Tian's gaze darkened as he continued to ask, "Then can June Ouching survive by relying on the nether ghost vein and the dragon spring vein?" "It's very difficult, almost impossible." Fat Cat's expression darkened, saying, "Although the nether ghost vein and the dragon spring vein are strong, they can only slightly resist and delay the speed at which the power of total annihilation devours life force. If it was just now, June Ouching's life force would be completely devoured by the power of total annihilation within half an hour. She would also die within half an hour." "Half an hour!" Nye Tian's eyes trembled as he exclaimed in shock. "Nye Tian, don't be nervous." Fat Cat forced a smile and said, "I have already sealed June Ouching in ice just now." Nye Tian's eyes trembled as he finally understood that Fat Cat had sealed June Ouching in ice just now. Nye Tian's mother, Chiwu Yunxiu, was also on the brink of death. She had also used this method to temporarily preserve her life. "Then June Ouching should be safe now, right?" Nye Tian took a deep breath and asked anxiously. "No." Fat Cat shook her head, saying, "June Ouching's situation is different from your mother's. Even if she is sealed in ice, she still cannot stop the power of total annihilation from devouring her life force. But under the state of ice, the speed at which the power of total annihilation devours life force will be greatly slowed. So for the next half a month, June Ouching will be safe. I don't know what will happen after half a month." "Half a month!" When Nye Tian heard Fat Cat's words, he couldn't help but tremble, but his entire being was much calmer. Half a month's time wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. It was much better than half an hour. "Nye Tian, you have half a month's time to find something that can suppress the power of total annihilation for June Ouching." Fat Cat spoke again, her expression solemn. Nye Tian nodded, his eyes determined. June Ouching had become like this because she tried to save him. No matter what price he had to pay, he must save her. "Fat, do you know of any power that can suppress the power of total annihilation?" After calming down, Nye Tian asked in a low voice. "I don't know yet." Fat Cat shook her head, looking like she was in a difficult position. He guessed that if it was the heart of all trees, it should be able to suppress the power of total annihilation. Unfortunately, it was impossible for Nye Tian to find the heart of all trees at the moment. And even if he found the heart of all trees, with June Ouching's current state, she couldn't merge with it. June Ouching was different from Chiwu Yunxiu. The latter only needed the power of the heart of all trees to awaken. But June Ouching could only have the chance to suppress the power of total annihilation by merging with the heart of all trees. When Nye Tian heard Fat Cat's words, his expression turned solemn. Nye Tian, don't be dejected. Fat Cat said, I have observed this place. This heaven ascension realm is very mysterious. Perhaps there is something here that can suppress the power of total annihilation. Nye Tian nodded, his expression determined. As long as there is a slight possibility, even if I have to search the entire heaven ascension realm, I will find something that can suppress the power of total annihilation. Then, Nye Tian didn't delay and immediately began his search. But in the next moment, he suddenly thought of something and his expression changed. He looked at Fat Cat and asked, Fat, am I the owner of the sacred heart of the heavenly law? He suddenly remembered what happened on the heaven ascension platform and was puzzled. At the same time, he thought of a possibility that made him a little excited. You are not the master of the heavenly law. Fat Cat shook her head. The real master of the heavenly law is able to trigger the sacred heart to recognize him as its owner and can merge with the sacred heart. I am not. When Nye Tian heard Fat Cat's words, there was no disappointment in his eyes. Instead, he was very excited. Nye Tian didn't care whether he was the master of the heavenly law or not. But if he wasn't the master of the heavenly law, did that mean that the real master of the heavenly law was June Ouching? After all, there were only 3 people who had set foot on the heaven ascension platform: Kuemu Jingchen, Nye Tian, and June Ouching. Since Kuemu Jingchen and Nye Tian were not the master of the heavenly law, then the real master of the heavenly law must be June Ouching. And among the 3 of them, only June Ouching hadn't tried it. Just now, Fat Cat said that the real master of the heavenly law could not only trigger the sacred heart to recognize him as its owner, but could also merge with the sacred heart. If June Ouching was the master of the heavenly law, then wouldn't she be fine after merging with the sacred heart? The sacred heart of the heavenly law was so powerful that it should have no problem suppressing the power of total annihilation. Chapter 25-22. Chapter 25-22. Chapter 25-22 Demon Heart. Just as Nye Tian was feeling excited, Fat Cat suddenly spoke, causing him to freeze on the spot. What did you say, Fat? Only after a dozen or so seconds did Nye Tian react. He let out a strange cry and looked at the little Fat Cat in disbelief. I said, June Ouching is not the master of the heavenly law. Fat Cat looked at Nye Tian and said with a serious face, How is that possible? Nye Tian was stunned on the spot. At that time, on the ascending heaven platform, the people closest to the sacred heart were only Nye Tian and the other 2. Nye Tian and Kuemu Jingchen had confirmed that they were not the master of the heavenly law. Then the master of the heavenly law should be June Ouching. But now, Fat Cat actually said that June Ouching was not the master of the heavenly law. How was that possible? Then who was the real master of the heavenly law? Could it be that the sacred heart was wrong? Did it recognize the wrong person? How could the sacred heart of the heavenly law recognize the wrong person? Nye Tian, I know you don't understand, but the 3 of you are not the master of the heavenly law. Fat Cat knew what Nye Tian was thinking, and there was a strange look in her eyes. The real master of the heavenly law is someone else. How is that possible? Nye Tian was stunned for a long time, and finally reacted. His face was full of disbelief. Could it be that there was someone else hidden on the ascending heaven platform at that time? Nye Tian, don't you find it strange? At this time, Fat Cat fixed her eyes and said, Just now on the ascending heaven platform, when Kuemu Boy approached the sacred heart, he was directly hit by the pressure of the sacred heart and flew out. And when you got close to the heavenly law sacred heart, the heavenly law sacred heart spun rapidly and shone brightly, releasing endless holy light. Moreover, you were not rejected by the heavenly law sacred heart. Nye Tian was stunned once again, and his expression became even more puzzled. The fat cat's words were indeed puzzling. It was as if the heavenly Sacred Heart and Nye Tian had some sort of connection. But after that, the heavenly Sacred Heart became dim, which made people even more puzzled. Fat, what's going on? Nye Tian forced himself to calm down and said, if I'm not the master of the heavenly law, why would I have a connection with the divine heart of the heavenly law? Everything was too strange, and he could not understand it at all. Nye Tian. At this moment, the fat cat suddenly looked at Nye Tian with a strange expression and said in a deep voice, the person who had a reaction with the heavenly Sacred Heart is indeed you. It was also because of you that the heavenly law Sacred Heart appeared. Perhaps it's because of the appearance of the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart, so when you stepped onto the 9th floor, it didn't resonate with the heavens. It's me. Nye Tian looked at the fat cat and felt that his brain was not enough to process the information. He said in astonishment, then am I the master of the heavenly law? You are not the master of the heavenly law. The fat cat said in a deep voice, in fact, to be exact, there is something in your body that has a reaction with the heavenly Sacred Heart. It is that thing that caused the heavenly Sacred Heart to appear. But when the heavenly Sacred Heart discovered that you are not the real owner of that thing, the heavenly Sacred Heart became dim. Nye Tian frowned and his eyes trembled. He said in horror, Fat, you mean that the real owner of that thing is the master of the heavenly law? Yes. The fat cat nodded heavily and said word by word, the thing in your body that has a reaction with the heavenly Sacred Heart is the tear of the princess. The tear of the princess. When Nye Tian heard these words, his eyes suddenly trembled, and his whole body stiffened again. At this moment, he finally understood everything. So everything was because of the tear of the princess. The one who had a reaction with the heavenly Sacred Heart was not Nye Tian, but the tear of the princess. And Nye Tian was not the real owner of the tear of the princess, so he was not the real master of the heavenly law. The real master of the heavenly law was Cher. Nye Tian was stunned for more than 10 seconds before he finally reacted and said with a look of horror, how could he have imagined that the one who caused so many things on the heavenly platform was actually Cher, who was in another domain? Yes. The fat cat sighed and said, the girl with the meridian of 3 lives is the real master of the heavenly law. Phew! After a long time, Nye Tian let out a long breath. So this was the truth of the matter. But he was very puzzled and couldn't help but frown and ask, Fat, Cher was born from the heaven-punishing demon heart. How could she be the owner of the heavenly law Sacred Heart? The heaven-punishing demon heart and the heavenly law Sacred Heart. These two names sounded like extreme opposites. A person born from the heaven-punishing demon heart was actually the owner of the heavenly law Sacred Heart. Why did it feel so unbelievable? The fat cat's expression was much calmer, and she smiled faintly and said, the heaven-punishing demon heart and the heavenly law Sacred Heart are indeed opposites. One is a demon, the other is a saint. One is bloodthirsty, the other is pure and holy. As she said this, the fat cat couldn't help but look at Nye Tian and said with a smile, but don't forget what kind of role Cher played in the 3 demon heart incarnations. Good body. Nye Tian's eyes trembled, and the 2 words blurted out. The heaven-punishing demon heart, the 3 demon heart incarnations. Good body, evil body, and killing body. The 3 incarnations had already appeared. Good body Cher, evil body blazing 9 blades, killing body 7 kills. Although Cher was born from the demon heart, her nature was pure and kind, which was the exact opposite of the evil body and killing body. Born from the demon heart, but able to maintain a kind and pure heart. It is the light in the dark abyss, the justice in the vortex of evil. The fat cat's expression turned solemn, and she said in a clear voice, such a person, if not the owner of the heavenly law Sacred Heart, that would be really strange. After listening to the fat cat's words, Nye Tian was stunned, and he couldn't speak for a long time. The fat cat's words were very convincing. Cher should indeed be the owner of the heavenly law Sacred Heart. Fat, is there any relationship between the heaven-punishing demon heart and the heavenly law Sacred Heart? After completely calming down, Nyetian frowned and couldn't help but ask. I don't know. The fat cat shook her fat head and replied. The heaven-punishing demon heart and the heavenly law Sacred Heart might be related, but the current fat cat didn't know. Nyetian, you must protect the heavenly law Sacred Heart well, even if you keep it on behalf of Cher. The fat cat's eyes flashed, and she said, I believe that one day, the heavenly law Sacred Heart will be of great use. Yes. Nyetian nodded. He would, of course, protect the heavenly law Sacred Heart well. Although he was not the owner of the heavenly law, he now had the tear of the princess, so temporarily protecting the heavenly law Sacred Heart was not too much. Vaguely, Nyetian felt that there must be an extraordinary relationship between the heavenly law Sacred Heart and the heaven-punishing demon heart. Next, Nyetian began to run wildly in the heaven ascension realm, looking for something that could suppress the power of annihilation. He flew through the dense forest like a nimble flying beast. In the blink of an eye, half a day had passed, but Nyetian found nothing. This forest was very vast, and if he continued to search aimlessly, it would only be a waste of time. Chapter 25-23. How dare you? Zi Zhuxin. Nyetian's eyebrows instantly dropped as he realized that the person who was calling for help was none other than Zi Zhuxin. Over there. Nyetian turned around and looked into the forest. He guessed that the cry for help came from tens of thousands of meters away, not far away from him. He immediately sprinted in the direction of the forest. At the same time, a figure leaned against a tree in the forest. Her body was covered in blood, and it was obvious that she was seriously injured. This figure was none other than Zi Zhuxin. In front of Zi Zhuxin, 3 martial artists were walking toward her. 3 pairs of eyes were staring at Zi Zhuxin with lust. What do you want? I am the patriarch. Zi Zhuxin's voice was trembling, and her eyes were filled with panic. Lady Patriarch, we're looking for you. One of the martial artists smiled, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Which sect are you from? If my father finds out, your entire branch sect will be implicated. Zi Zhuxin's beautiful eyes flickered. Although she was threatening, her tone was chaotic. Is that so? The martial artist smiled cold and said, Lady Patriarch, I'll tell you the truth. Your father won't be the sect leader for long. The leader of the 10,000 Mountain sect will be replaced soon. You're lying. Zi Zhuxin's voice was trembling, and the fear in her eyes was even more obvious. I'm not lying. If it wasn't for that, do you think we would dare to attack you? The warrior chuckled and suddenly took a step forward. He reached out to pull Zi Zhuxin and tore her sleeve. Wow, she really is a little beauty. Her skin is so tender. Another martial artist walked up, and his eyes were fixed on Zi Zhuxin's jade-like arm, and he was almost drooling. You're shameless! Zi Zhuxin screamed, and hugged her arms, tears flowing out of her beautiful eyes. She was seriously injured and couldn't fight back. Even if she wasn't injured, she wouldn't be a match for the 3 martial artists in front of her. They were 3 peak paramount gods. Miss Imperial Maiden, go ahead and cry. The more you cry, the more enjoyable it will be. The warrior chuckled and suddenly took a step forward, pouncing towards Zi Zhuxin like a ferocious wolf. Zi Zhuxin was so frightened that her face turned pale, and she actually closed her eyes. Bang! However, at this moment, she heard a muffled sound. She abruptly opened her eyes and discovered that there were only 2 people left in front of her. The person who had pounced on her had actually disappeared. What happened? The other 2 martial artists were stunned for a moment before they reacted and looked to the other side. The 3rd martial artist was already covered in blood, lying on the ground and unable to get up. The scene just now was too strange. It was as if an extremely fast sword intent had swept past, and then that warrior had been sent flying. How dare you? How dare you attack the Imperial clan, miss? Right at this moment, a voice that was piercingly cold like slaughter resounded out, and it was extremely ghastly and revealed extremely dense killing intent. Who is it? The two martial artists were stunned at the same time, then they immediately turned around and saw a silver-haired martial artist behind them, staring at them like a ferocious wolf. It's you. The two martial artists were stunned again and exclaimed. They were not unfamiliar with the face that appeared in front of them. It was Nie Tian. You are martial artists from the first sect, right? Nie Tianling said coldly, with a trace of a strange smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. These two martial artists were not unfamiliar to Nie Tian. He had seen them when he met the first sect leader, Kuei Mu Jun. Yes, so what? One of the martial artists mustered up his courage, but his voice was trembling. When he was stared at by Nie Tian, he actually felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar, despair and coldness. They had seen Nie Tian fight with their own eyes, of course, they knew how terrifying the latter was. Yes, you must die. Nie Tianling said coldly, the killing intent in his eyes was very strong. Jun Aoqing almost died in the hands of Kuei Mu Jingchen, so he hated the people of the first sect very much. However, the next moment, Nie Tian's eyes flickered and he said, Now I will give you a chance to live. Tell me, what do you mean by what you just said? What did I say? One of the martial artists was stunned and said with a look of horror, Are you playing dumb? Nie Tianling laughed and took a step forward. Sword intent surged out of his whole body, surging like a raging wave, extremely violent. Just now, he heard these people say that Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's position as the first sect leader would not last long. This was obviously a conspiracy against Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Lord Nie Tian, will you spare our lives after we tell you? Another martial artist asked with a trembling voice. Nie Tian's lips twitched, and he spat out a word coldly. I'll speak. The martial artist's face turned pale, and he hurriedly said, Our Lord has joined forces with the people of Thousand Cloud Divine Sect and 100 River Divine Sect to deal with the first sect leader. Nie Tian frowned and asked coldly, Is that all? We only know this. The two martial artists trembled, and their knees went soft and they knelt down. If that's the case, then you're useless. Nie Tianling smiled coldly, and he took a step forward. Didn't you spare our lives? The two martial artists felt the almost solid killing intent, and they screamed in unison. I lied. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, and then he moved his body, and two sword intents directly fell, and pierced through the two martial artists' chests. Bang! Bang! Two muffled sounds were heard, and the two martial artists' bodies exploded, turning into a bloody light and dissipating. Seeing this, Zi Zhuxin's beautiful eyes flickered and her face paled. Miss Zi Zhuxin, are you all right? Nie Tian took a step forward, and quickly released the power of the earth vein source into Zi Zhuxin's body. Moments later, Zi Zhuxin recovered. Nie Tian, thank you, you saved me again. Zi Zhuxin changed into a clean set of clothes, and her face was flushed red. Nie Tian nodded, but his eyes were filled with doubt, and he asked, Miss Zi Zhuxin, I saw that your wounds were caused by cold qi. What happened? When he was treating Zi Zhuxin's wounds, he discovered that there was some kind of cold qi in the latter's wounds, and it was extremely strange. Nie Tian, I was about to tell you about this. Hearing Nie Tian's question, Zi Zhuxin's face lit up with excitement, and she said, I just passed by a strange valley, and I was injured by the cold qi released by the valley. Then, I met those three people, and bring me to that valley. Nie Tian did not wait for Zi Zhuxin to finish and interrupted her. He could sense that the cold qi in Zi Zhuxin's wounds was extraordinary, very extraordinary. All right, follow me. Zi Zhuxin nodded slightly, and her figure flashed, leading the way. About half an hour later, Nie Tian and Zi Zhuxin appeared at the edge of a mountain valley. Nie Tian, this is the valley. Zijushin pointed at the valley ahead, and said to Nie Tian. She had been injured once, so she looked at the valley nervously. Nie Tian looked at the valley in front of him, and he could not help but frown. The entire valley was very strange, and it was shrouded in a terrifying cold qi. Even though Nie Tian stood thousands of meters away, he could still feel the cold qi. What a strong cold qi! Nie Tian frowned, and then activated the holographic divine rune, covering the valley. Chapter 25-24. Valley killing formation. Countless sharp blades of cold qi, like a rain of arrows, covered the sky and covered the earth. Be careful! Nie Tian reacted quickly. With a low roar, his body surged with vast astral energy, and the astral soul shield was instantly activated, protecting him and Zijushin. Boom! Bang bang bang! Immediately, countless sharp blades of cold qi fell, bombarding the astral soul shield, producing a muffled sound. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the cold qi blades disappeared, and Nie Tian's figure moved slightly, and the astral soul shield outside his body directly collapsed. What a powerful cold qi! Seeing this, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown. Earlier, although the cold qi blades weren't able to break his astral soul shield, they were able to freeze it. Hence, when he moved his body, the astral soul shield instantly shattered. The astral soul shield was condensed from the astral energy, and the cold qi could actually freeze the astral soul shield. One could imagine how strong the cold qi was. Nie Tian, I was injured by this cold qi just now. Zijushin's small face trembled slightly, and said in shock. Nie Tian nodded slightly, and signaled Zijushin to step back. The cold qi was too terrifying, no wonder Zijushin was so badly injured. Fortunately, she met Nie Tian, otherwise, even if she didn't die in the hands of those few cultivators, she would still be frozen to death. Fat! At this time, Nie Tian suddenly thought of something, and his eyes trembled with passion, and he said, "What do you think of this cold qi? It's very suitable." How could Fat Cat not know what Nie Tian was thinking, and said with a smile, "If he can absorb this cold qi, it will be enough for that kid from the Wings clan to grow a second pair of demonic frost wings." Yes, I think so too. Nie Tian nodded heavily, and there was not a trace of fear in his eyes when he looked at the valley, but instead, it was very hot. At this moment, he was thinking about Emo of the Nine Extremities. Emo was currently in hibernation and urgently needed a large amount of cold energy to nourish him so that he could grow a second pair of cold demon wings. Nie Tian had been worrying about how to find cold energy, and now he had come across a valley filled with cold energy. How could he not be happy? Let's enter the valley and have a look. Nie Tian made up his mind. His silhouette flickered and he wanted to enter the valley. Nie Tian, what are you doing? At that moment, Zijushin's voice rang out anxiously. She didn't expect that Nie Tian would still want to enter the valley after being attacked by the cold air. Wasn't this courting death? Don't worry, I'll be fine. You can just wait outside. Nie Tian smiled faintly, then stepped out and walked into the valley. He was very cautious, and every step he took was very careful. As he got closer and closer to the valley, he could feel the biting cold air. He even felt that the surrounding space had become abnormally hard under the freezing cold air. It seemed that the structure of the space had been destroyed, making it difficult for him to walk. A moment later, Nie Tian's silhouette was less than 500 meters away from the valley. Fat, this cold air is so strong. Nie Tian took a deep breath and felt that he was in an ice cave. The cold air in the space was bone-chilling, as if it could penetrate into one's bones. Nie Tian even felt that his bones were cracking from the cold. Fortunately, his martial body was strong, and his blood, meridians, and bones were far stronger than ordinary martial artists. His ability to resist cold was also very good. Otherwise, he would have become an ice man at this moment. Nie Tian, watch out! At that moment, Fat Cat seemed to have sensed something and suddenly screamed. Huh! Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and then he felt an extremely cold energy appear and actually hit him in the face. Crack, crack, crack. Everywhere the cold energy passed, a terrifying ice pillar was left in the air. Starfire sea incineration. Nie Tian frowned and reacted instantly. He held the starlight heavenly slash in his hand and slashed out. Boom. Suddenly, a flaming sword shadow pounced out like a wild beast. A violent sword intent surged out and the space shook. Boom. Crack, crack, crack. In the next moment, the sword shadow and the cold air collided. A terrifying scene appeared. The huge flaming sword shadow was actually frozen by the cold air. Bang! Seeing this, Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and then he slashed out again, directly shattering the frozen flaming sword shadow in the air. Suddenly, endless sword intent and cold air appeared in the air, and only dissipated after a long time. This cold air is so scary. Nie Tian stood on the spot and couldn't help but take a deep breath and said in shock. He was currently about 500 meters away from the valley, but the cold air was already so scary. It was really hard to imagine what could be inside the valley that could release such a terrifying cold air. Nie Tian, wait a moment. Stay where you are and don't move. At that moment, Fat Cat's voice was heard, reminding Nie Tian. Yes. Nie Tian nodded heavily. He had already faintly felt that something was wrong, as if there was some kind of terrifying formation hidden in the valley. Just now, he accidentally triggered the formation, which was why he was attacked by the cold air. The cold air around him was very strong, but Nie Tian's martial body was strong enough to withstand it. What he was worried about was that if he entered the valley, he would accidentally trigger something and trigger the cold air to attack him. That would be troublesome. Then, Nie Tian stood on the spot, not daring to move. In silence, half an hour passed. What is Nie Tian doing? Zi Zhuxin watched from afar with a frown, a puzzled look on her face. Nie Tian stood outside the valley, not moving at all. This was too strange. But she knew how powerful the cold air was, and Nie Tian did not allow her to get close, so she did not dare to move. If she walked over at this time, not only would she not be able to help Nie Tian, but she would also become the latter's burden. Then, another half an hour passed. Nie Tian stood on the spot and unknowingly, a layer of frost formed on his body. The cold air in the space here was too strong. Even if his martial body was strong, it would be difficult for him to persist for long. But he did not dare to disturb Fat Cat, and could only wait patiently. It's done. After a moment, Fat Cat's voice finally sounded again. Just as his voice fell, a formation diagram appeared in Nie Tian's divine sense. Nie Tian, follow the formation diagram and walk carefully. Don't make any mistakes. Fat Cat wiped the sweat off his forehead and warned Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded. His body shook slightly, shaking off the frost on his body. His guess was right. There was a huge killing formation in the valley, and Fat Cat was deconstructing the formation, which was why it took so long. After that, Nie Tian carefully walked forward step by step according to the spell formation's instructions. As he got closer to the valley, he felt the cold air in the space around him getting colder and colder. In the end, he had to release the chaotic flame to resist the cold air in the space. The last step. Finally, Nie Tian took the last step and entered the valley. Chapter 25-25. Ice Dragon Pillars, this. After stepping into the valley, Nie Tian was stunned by the scene in front of him. It took him more than 10 seconds to react. His mouth was wide open, but he could not make a sound. At this moment, the scene in front of him in the valley was huge and shocking. The entire valley was tens of thousands of meters in circumference, and this space was a massive formation. On the outskirts of the valley was a vast expanse of glaciers that surrounded the entire valley. In the center of the valley there was a shocking scene. 12 huge ice pillars like frost giants stood majestically. Looking at the ice pillars, they reached into the clouds, as if they were connecting heaven and earth. These huge ice pillars were hundreds of thousands of meters tall, and even heaven and earth seemed small in comparison. The 12 ice pillars formed a huge circle, forming a huge formation that emitted endless cold air. The entire valley gave off an ancient and desolate feeling, as well as a feeling of vastness. In the space, there was an ancient aura that made people feel the wonders of heaven and earth, and the mysteries of the universe. Nye Tian looked at the huge formation in front of him, his expression blank, and he could not speak for a long time. At this moment, Fat Cat seemed to have noticed something and reminded Nye Tian, "Nye Tian, look carefully at those ice pillars." Nye Tian frowned and then looked at the 12 ice pillars. He first noticed that the ice pillars were carved with dense runes. They were intricate and mysterious, and surged with a surging aura. Next, he observed carefully and finally made the most shocking discovery. In each ice pillar there was a huge dragon. Ice dragon! In an instant, Nye Tian exclaimed, and his whole body froze on the spot. He was shocked by the size of the entire formation, and did not notice that there was a huge dragon in the ice pillars. 12 ice pillars, and each one was hundreds of thousands of meters long. Didn't that mean that the huge dragon in the ice pillars was hundreds of thousands of meters long? How was that possible? Nye Tian already had some understanding of the mystical dragon tribe. As far as he knew, even the king of the divine dragon clan, the golden giant dragon, was only a few thousand meters long. Even the dragon emperor of the golden colossal dragons he had seen was only about 3,000 meters in size. How could a dragon that was hundreds of thousands of meters long exist in this world? The pinnacle champions of the golden dragons could fight demi-saints or even pseudo-saints of humans. In that case, how terrifying would the power of a dragon that was hundreds of thousands of meters long be? Thinking of this, Nye Tian felt even more shocked and was completely speechless. After a long time, he finally calmed down a little, and his expression softened a little. The scene in front of them was too shocking. "Little fatty, are these giant dragons real?" Nye Tian was still a little skeptical, and he asked in a deep voice. "It should be true." Fat Cat was unsure as well, and said with a moved expression, "There's no telling how long these dragons have been sealed in the ice pillars." At those words, Fat Cat's expression changed weirdly as if remembering something. "I remember that in ancient legends, there was a race of mystical frost giants that loved to feed on dragons." Feed on dragons? Nye Tian did a double take, and could not say anything for a long time. What kind of beings were there in ancient times, that there was actually a race that fed on dragons? Fat nodded and continued, "The formation before us looks like some kind of sacrificial altar for ancestors. That is why I'm guessing that it must be an altar for the mystical frost giants to worship their ancestors. In fact, these dragon pillars are offerings that the mystical frost giants offer to their ancestors." This. Nye Tian sucked in a breath of cold air when he heard Little Fat Cat's words, unable to react for a long time. In his opinion, these giant dragons trapped in the ice pillars were already unimaginably powerful. And the mystical frost giants had actually captured the giant dragons and sealed them in the ice pillars as sacrifices to their ancestors. The mystical frost giants were just too powerful. Yes, that should be the case. Fat Cat nodded, once again confirming his guess. "Fat, these giant dragons trapped in the ice pillars are already dead, right?" Nye Tian forced himself to calm down and asked nervously. If these giant dragons were not dead, and Nye Tian had accidentally triggered the altar's formation and awakened the giant dragons, then there would be trouble. They should be dead. Fat Cat was not too sure, but then he laughed and comforted Nye Tian. "Don't worry, even if these giant dragons are still alive, it will take at least hundreds or thousands of years for them to recover from being sealed in ice." "Oh, that's good, that's good." Nye Tian was relieved after hearing Fat Cat's words. "Nye Tian, look at the mystical ice runes outside the mystical frost dragon pillars. They are used to seal the giant dragons. These runes contain extremely terrifying cold energy. Then, Fat Cat chuckled and said, "The cold energy that attacked you just now was released by the mystical ice runes. If we can let that demonic Frostwings clan kid absorb these mystical ice runes, it will be enough for him to grow demonic Frostwings." Nia Tion's eyes flickered. Then how can he absorb the mystical ice runes? Well, I don't know either. Fat Cat's face stiffened, and he said with a troubled expression. Nia Tion was speechless. The mystical ice runes were the power of the mystical frost giant. One could imagine how terrifying these runes were. The problem now was how to let EMO absorb the mystical ice runes. EMO was currently hibernating in the 9 extremities. His whole body was inside the demonic frost cocoon. It would be difficult and dangerous to get him out of the 9 extremities, because the demonic frost cocoon was not stable. Once it was stimulated by external forces, the cocoon would be destroyed, and EMO's life would be in danger. Since there was no way to get EMO out of the 9 extremities, there was only one way left: move the 12 mystical frost dragon pillars into the 9 extremities. But this method did not seem to be possible. The 12 mystical frost dragon pillars, each of them hundreds of thousands of meters long, their weight was shocking and unimaginable. With Nia Tion's current strength, he estimated that he could only lift one mystical frost dragon pillar at the limit of his martial body. But the 12 mystical frost dragon pillars were interconnected. If he moved one mystical frost dragon pillar, the other pillars would definitely be damaged, and the entire formation would be destroyed. No one knew what would happen when that happened. Just as Nia Tion was thinking hard, Fat Cat saw through his thoughts and asked, "Nia Tion, are you thinking of moving the entire valley into the 9 extremities?" "Yes." Nia Tion nodded his head heavily, his gaze sweeping across the 12 mystical frost dragon pillars with blazing eyes. The 12 mystical frost dragon pillars contained unimaginable power. If he could move the entire valley into the 9 extremities, wouldn't that power belong to Nia Tion? "Maybe there's someone who can help you." Fat Cat frowned, his eyes burning with passion as he said in a deep voice. "Who?" Nia Tion's eyes narrowed as he looked at Fat Cat with reddened eyes. But at this moment, a scream came from outside the valley. Chapter 25-26. Chapter 25-26. Chapter 25-26. Shameless. In the valley, Nia Tion's expression changed when he heard Zi Zhuxin scream. He immediately rushed out of the valley. At the same time, outside the valley. What do you want to do?" Zi Zhuxin's voice trembled as she looked at the person in front of her. In front of her stood a figure, who was looking at her with a murderous gaze. This figure was none other than the young sect master of the first sect, Kuemu Jingchen. "Zi Zhuxin, you can only blame your bad luck for meeting me here," Kuemu Jingchen said cold. The murderous intent in his eyes condensed into a substance and shrouded Zi Zhuxin. You want to kill me?" Zi Zhuxin screamed in horror, her face as pale as paper. She had already met the martial artists of the first sect before, and those people also wanted to kill her. Now that she met Kuemu Jingchen, the latter also wanted to kill her. "Zi Zhuxin, you shouldn't have participated in the path to heaven. Dying here is the best ending for you," Kuemu Jingchen said solemnly. He took a step forward and his aura burst out. "Kuemu Jingchen, stop!" At this moment, a voice rang out and stopped Kuemu Jingchen. Hearing this voice, Kuemu Jingchen's expression suddenly changed. He turned around and saw a silver-haired figure. It was Nia Tion. "Nia Tion." Meeting Nia Tion again, Kuemu Jingchen's expression changed, and he said gloomily, "I've been looking for you for a long time. I didn't expect you to appear by yourself." Since entering the Heaven Ascension realm, Kuemu Jingchen immediately recovered his strength. After that, he had been looking for Nia Tion, but he didn't expect Nia Tion to appear by himself. "Kuemu Jingchen, what's the use of bullying a little girl? If you're a man, fight me fairly." Nie Tian walked over step by step and shouted. Kuemu Jingchen frowned and noticed that Nie Tian was walking very slowly. He immediately understood something and sneered. Nie Tian, don't worry, I will kill Zijushin first, then you. It's not bad that you can watch a good show before you die. I want you to watch with your own eyes as I slowly kill Zijushin. As he spoke, Kuemu Jingchen took a step forward and attacked Zijushin. Boom! He struck out with his palm, and the force of his palm surged like the sea, pressing down on Zijushin. Zijushin screamed as she felt a violent force sweeping towards her. After the palm force swept past, Zijushin was not injured, but her clothes were mostly torn, revealing large patches of her fair, tender flesh. You bastard! Zijushin's body retreated abruptly, but she soon reacted. She screamed and crossed her arms in front of her chest to cover her sensitive parts. She did not expect that Kuemu Jingchen did not kill her directly, but humiliated her in this way. Bastard! When Nie Tian saw this scene, his face suddenly sank, and he roared violently. But at this moment, he could not rush over to stop it, because he was still in the danger zone, and he must carefully walk out according to the instructions of the formation. If he rushed out now, it would only make things worse if he triggered the altar's killing formation in the valley. Nie Tian, just watch, I will slowly torture Zijushin to death. Kuemu Jingchen had long seen that Nie Tian was restricted by the formation and could not rush over quickly, so he was even more fearless and said sinisterly. He was someone who possessed the fourth seal, so his perceptive abilities were extremely strong. In particular, he had an extraordinary perception towards the aura of a formation boundary. So he could see at a glance that the space where Nie Tian was in the range of a powerful killing formation. My eldest daughter, I hope you can have a good time with me. Then, Kuemu Jingchen's eyes flickered with lust. He stepped forward step by step, and his aura surged out, turning into a vast pressure, shrouding Zijushin. Ah! Bastard, let me go! Zijushin was shrouded by the invisible pressure, unable to move at all, and could only shout desperately. Shout, shout hard, the louder you shout, the more fun this game will be. Kuemu Jingchen laughed wretchedly, and the lust in his eyes became more intense. In the blink of an eye, he had already come to Zijushin's side. At this moment, even a fool knew what Kuemu Jingchen was going to do. Bastard! Nie Tian roared, and no longer cared about anything else. The star soul wings appeared behind him, and he directly rushed over. Nie Tian, be careful! But at this moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded. Immediately, in the surrounding space, endless cold air appeared, like endless waves, surging towards Nie Tian. Crack, crack, crack! Before Nie Tian had time to react, the space around him was completely frozen. Even his star soul wings were frozen in the space. This time, he triggered more Xian ice runes, and the Xian ice cold power broke out, making him unable to resist. Damn it! Nie Tian growled, and his whole body kept surging with star soul power, trying to break through the restraint of the Xian ice power. Unfortunately, the Xian ice power was too strong. Even if he tried his best, it would take a lot of time to break through the restraint. Ah! Seeing this scene, Kuemu Jingchen couldn't help but laugh wildly and shouted arrogantly, Nie Tian, don't you like to be a hero? Don't you like to save people? Today, I will let you watch me rape and kill Zijushin in front of you. After saying that, Kuemu Jingchen's eyes trembled, and he suddenly stretched out his hand, grabbing Zijushin. No! Zijushin screamed. Her eyes were filled with despair, and tears kept falling from her eyes. Bastard! Stop right now! At this moment, a furious roar was suddenly heard. Boom! Immediately, a violent force fell from the void, blasting towards Kuemu Jingchen. Kuemu Jingchen was stunned, and then he raised his hand to block the violent blow in the air. But when he looked in front of him again, Zijushin had disappeared. Damn it! The next moment Kuemu Jingchen roared, and then looked to the other side. His eyes locked on a man in white, and shouted the man's name, Su Qianfan. At this moment, the person who suddenly appeared to save Zi Zhuxin was none other than Su Qianfan. Senior brother Su. When Zi Zhuxin saw Su Qianfan, she shouted and threw herself into the latter's arms, and tears of grievance gushed out. Su Qianfan hugged the girl in his arms tightly, feeling that the latter was like a kitten, lovable. Since childhood, he had always treated Zi Zhuxin as a sister. But when he saw Zi Zhuxin was about to be desecrated by Kuemu Jingchen, there was a different kind of anger in his heart. And when Zi Zhuxin threw herself into his arms, he felt an indescribable heartache. He suddenly had an impulse to protect the girl in his arms for the rest of his life. Anyone who harmed this girl deserved to die. Chapter 25-27. Chapter 25-27. Chapter 25-27. Myriad Wood Sword Art. Su Qianfan was a person with a strong sense of justice, and at the same time, he was very peaceful. He had a tolerant attitude towards everyone. Just like before, when Ye Tian cut off Xiang Iru's face, he didn't have any killing intent towards Ye Tian. But at this moment, he had a real killing intent towards Kuemu Jingchen. Kuemu Jingchen's attempt to insult Zi Zhuxin had exceeded the limit of his tolerance. When Ye Tian saw Su Qianfan's arrival, his heart was finally at ease. He knew Su Qianfan's strength. He was definitely a half-step peak expert. He had fought with Su Qianfan before, and their combat power was almost the same. Su Qianfan's appearance, even if he couldn't kill Kuemu Jingchen, it was enough to block the latter. Right now, Ye Tian needed some time to break the ice that was sealing him. As long as he walked out of the range of the valley's killing array, then joined forces with Su Qianfan to kill Kuemu Jingchen. Su Qianfan, I'd like to see how well Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 taught you. Kuemu Jingchen calmed down, looked at Su Qianfan with a gloomy look, and said coldly, Presumptuous! How dare you call my master's name? Su Qianfan roared in a low voice, and then his figure slightly moved to the side, letting Zi Zhuxin retreat to the side. Kuemu Jingchen smiled cold and said, Su Qianfan, you may not know yet, but your master will soon not be Lord Sect Lord. If you are able to leave the Heaven Ascension realm alive, you should be able to see that Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 has become a prisoner. Bullshit. Su Qianfan's sword-like eyebrows raised, and he roared in a deep voice. Kuemu Jingchen was not angry but just sneered and said, Come on, make your move. Let me see how powerful you, the so-called peak genius, is. It's more than enough to kill you. Su Qianfan sneered, and the Yuan Ling sword appeared in his hand, and directly stabbed out. Boom! The sword shadows whizzed out, 1 into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8. In the blink of an eye, thousands of sword shadows were formed, like arrows that covered the sky, forming a net of sword shadows that bombarded towards Kuemu Jingchen. This time, Su Qianfan was truly enraged. His first move was the myriad wood sword technique. Seeing this, Kuemu Jingchen wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he sneered and launched a palm. Wherever the palm force passed, the endless sword phantoms were shattered. Su Qianfan sensed the terrifying power coming at him. His eyes narrowed, and he suddenly retreated, stabilizing himself a few hundred meters away. After repelling Su Qianfan with one palm, Kuemu Jingchen sneered and said arrogantly, The disciple of Lord Sect Master is just SOSO. Arrogant. Su Qianfan's sword-like brows knit together as he roared furiously, and the rainstorm's sword once again slashed out violently. 100 trees welcoming the spring. As the furious voice fell, Su Qianfan's sword intent burst out, condensing into a huge sword shadow, rushing out like a mad dragon, blooming with dazzling sword brilliance, and pressed towards Kuemu Jingchen. The power of this sword was obviously stronger than the previous one. The violent sword aura that was about to be unleashed caused the void to tremble slightly. This sword is a bit interesting. Kuemu Jingchen smiled coldly, and then his whole body's momentum soared. He launched a palm, and a huge withered wood palm print appeared. Suddenly, the world was silent and the space seemed to be still for a moment. Boom! The next moment, the palm shadow and the sword shadow collided head-on, and there was a roar in the air. Suddenly, endless violent force surged out and spread in all directions. Instantly, the trees within a 10,000-meter radius were directly crushed into powder. Terrifying waves of energy rushed into the void, causing people to tremble in fear. The figures of Su Qianfan and Kuemu Jingchen retreated 1,000 meters at the same time, then stood still and looked at each other coldly. Kuemu Jingchen, I didn't expect you to hide so deeply. Su Qianfan said solemnly, and the killing intent in his eyes did not diminish, but instead became stronger. He had to admit that he was very surprised at the moment. Before the path to heaven began, Kuemu Jingchen was completely unknown in the 10,000-layer mountain sect. But after the path to heaven opened, Kuemu Jingchen first reached the top of the platform, and then almost became the owner of the Sacred Heart. This series of events caused Kuemu Jingchen's name to become a sensation in the entire 10,000-layer mountain sect. It was no exaggeration to say that Kuemu Jingchen's name had now surpassed Su Qianfan's. Su Qianfan and Kuemu Jingchen were fighting at this moment, and he did not expect that the latter's strength would be so strong. Su Qianfan, your so-called peak genius is a bit unworthy of your name. Kuemu Jingchen smiled coldly, and his eyes were full of ridicule. Is that so? Su Qianfan's eyes darkened, and then his aura surged again. The sword momentum around him began to skyrocket, and a sharp sword intent, like a sharp blade, almost tore the void. This sword momentum is much stronger than before. Nie Tian had broken through the ice seal at this moment, and he couldn't help but exclaim when he felt the sword momentum around Su Qianfan. Su Qianfan was indeed a peak genius, and his terrifying sword strength was really amazing. Very good, I'm afraid this is your true strength. Kuemu Jingchen felt the huge sword momentum in the space, but he was not afraid, and the corner of his mouth raised into a mocking smile. 10,000 wood sword technique, 1,000 wood sinking boat. At this moment, Su Qianfan said in a deep voice, and the sword intent in his body instantly surged like a roaring sea, stirring up endless power in the air. Kill. The next moment, he growled. Lin Yu Mu Feng slashed out with his sword. Infinite sword intent instantly condensed, and a huge sword shadow appeared. It was like an ancient giant beast rolling out from the void, fiercely pouncing towards Kuemu Jingchen. Good! Kuemu Jingchen's eyes darkened and he screamed, and then a gray force surged out of his body. Suddenly, the void was shrouded by a desolate aura, and the space within tens of thousands of meters became dark in an instant. Annihilation force! Nie Tian saw this scene, and his eyes suddenly sank and his face changed. Kuemu Jingchen used the power of the Annihilation Death Seal. Could Su Qianfan be his opponent? Go to hell! The next moment, Kuemu Jingchen let out a beast-like roar, and then he blasted out a punch, and the annihilation force condensed around him, and a huge fist shadow roared out. Boom! Immediately, above the sky, the sword shadow and the fist shadow collided with each other, and the roar was like thunder, resounding throughout the world. The surrounding world suddenly sank, and the space was pulled tight, as if it was about to be torn apart in the next moment. These two forces were very violent and terrifying, but they couldn't destroy each other in an instant, showing a state of stalemate. Chi-chi-chi. There was a harsh sound in the air, and a violent force raged, tearing everything. Boom! After a long time, a majestic sound suddenly rang out. At the center of the collision, an enormous shock wave that could be seen with the naked eye appeared. With a loud bang, it exploded and spread in all directions. Rumble! Suddenly, the terrible sound kept coming out, and everywhere the huge wave of air passed, it was a mess. Chapter 25-28. Chapter 25-28. Chapter 25-28. Death is hereafter a long time, The airwaves in the sky gradually dissipated, and two figures appeared. It was Su Qianfan and Kuei-mu Jingchen. Looking at the two of them from afar, Nie Tian sensed their auras, and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. The two of them were truly frightening. Under such a fierce confrontation, they were actually not injured. Two figures stood in the sky. One was like a giant sword, extremely fierce, and the other was like a mountain, powerful and rolling. Su Qianfan, your strength is really strong, beyond my expectations. Kuei-mu Jingchen said coldly, his eyes flashing cold. The same goes for you. Su Qianfan replied coldly, and the sword aura around his body continued to increase explosively. These two guys are really strong, Nie Tian secretly exclaimed. Then his figure moved, and he was about to walk out of the range of the black ice-killing array. Haha, it's really lively here. At this moment, a sinister laughter suddenly sounded. Then, a figure appeared, a pair of cold eyes directly locked on Zijushin. Huh! Nie Tian looked at the figure that suddenly appeared, and his eyes sank. This figure, he was not unfamiliar, it was Chang Yufeng. Chang Yufeng, you came at the right time, go help senior brother Su and kill Kuei-mu Jingchen. Seeing Chang Yufeng, Zijushin was stunned at first, then she shouted happily. Yeah, I did come at the right time. Chang Yufeng smiled coldly, his pair of eyes fixed on Zijushin, emitting a strange brilliance. As he spoke, he walked towards Zijushin. Chang Yufeng, what do you want? Zijushin had already changed into a new set of clothes. She noticed that Chang Yufeng's gaze was not right, and her beautiful eyes trembled, and she asked with a trembling voice. Exiner, we have known each other for so long, you should know my feelings for you. Chang Yufeng smiled, his eyes flashing obscenely. Chang Yufeng, what are you doing? Su Qianfan saw the scene below, his face sank and he roared cold. He did not expect Chang Yufeng to appear at this time, and it was obvious that he had ulterior motives. Chang Yufeng, don't waste your breath on her, just kill her. On the other side, Kuei-mu Jingchen's voice also sounded, and he shouted directly in a commanding tone. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he saw this. He immediately reacted. Previously, he had already heard from a few disciples of the first sect that the first sect master had made a move against the Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and had even joined forces with two other sections. It seemed that the first sect master had been planning for a long time, and the Chang family had most likely surrendered to the Kuei-mu family. Young sect master, don't be in such a hurry. Before I kill Zijushin, of course I have to have some fun. Chang Yufeng glanced at Kuei-mu Jingchen and chuckled. He then moved and pounced towards Zijushin. Nie Tian's guess was right. The Chang family had already surrendered to the Kuei-mu family. Not only Chang Yufeng, but even his grandfather Chang Kuan was already a member of the Kuei-mu army. The Kuei-mu army had coveted the position of the main sect for a long time. Not only had they joined forces with people from other sects, but they had also bribed many elders of the main sect. Exiner, my grandfather has proposed to your father many times. Unfortunately, your father has always refused. Chang Yufeng came to Zijushin's side and said coldly, our Chang family has contributed a lot to the 10,000 Mountain sect. Why wouldn't your father agree to a small marriage? Zijushin's body kept retreating, and her face was already as pale as a piece of paper. It turned out that the Chang family's betrayal was because of this matter. Chang Yufeng, what do you want? Zijushin's lips trembled slightly, and she looked panicked. Exiner, don't you know what I want? Chang Yufeng laughed lewdly, then stretched out his hand, and a violent force enveloped Zijushin. He then moved and ran away. Ah! Zijushin screamed, but she could not resist, and could only be taken away by Chang Yufeng. Exner. Su Qianfan saw this scene from high up in the sky, and he immediately shouted. He moved and wanted to chase after Chang Yufeng. But at this moment, Kuei-mu Jingchen stopped him and said in a cold tone, Su Qianfan, your opponent is me. Damn it. Su Qianfan roared, and his whole body surged with sword aura. His whole body was like a murderous sword, releasing an extremely sharp killing intent. Kuei-mu Jingchen was not afraid at all. His whole body surged with thousand destruction force, and his eyes released a cold light. At this moment, Nie Tian finally walked out of the profound ice-killing array. He looked up at Su Qianfan and Kuei-mu Jingchen in the sky, then he moved and chased in the direction where Chang Yufeng escaped. With Su Qianfan's strength, even if he could not kill Kuei-mu Jingchen, he had the ability to protect himself. The most important thing now was to save Zi Zhuxin. Nie Tian's figure was extremely fast. He shuttled through the dense forest and chased after Chang Yufeng's aura. At the same time, Chang Yufeng frantically escaped with Zi Zhuxin. He had already opened up a distance of tens of thousands of meters from Nie Tian. As long as he hid his aura, it would be difficult for Nie Tian to find him. Who is it? But at this moment, a voice sounded, and then a figure appeared and blocked Chang Yufeng. Chang Yufeng stopped and used a force to control Zi Zhuxin. He looked at the person in front of him and said in a cold tone, "You are from the 7th sect." He had seen the martial artist in front of him before. He was standing with Nie Tian, and he was from the 7th sect. It turned out that the person who stopped Chang Yufeng was none other than Yu Qingqi. Miss Imperial Clan daughter. Yu Qingqi's face darkened, and he could not help but scream when he saw Zi Zhuxin. "Save me!" Zi Zhuxin also saw Yu Qingqi and shouted loudly. "Bastard, let go of Miss Imperial Clan daughter." Yu Qingqi's eyes narrowed and he growled. "Do you think a piece of trash like you can stop me?" Chang Yufeng's lips curled into a cold smile, and he took a step forward. His aura exploded and he punched out. The shadow of the palm was like a rolling mountain, and it pressed down on Yu Qingqi. Yu Qingqi could feel the vast power pressing down on him, and his eyes trembled. He reacted quickly and punched out. Unfortunately, compared to Chang Yufeng, he was far too weak. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and Yu Qingqi was sent flying. His body smashed into a huge tree, and when he landed on the ground, he was covered in blood. "Trash!" Chang Yufeng sneered. He did not even look at Yu Qingqi, and his body moved, preparing to leave. "How dare you hit my 7th brother, stop right there." But at this moment, a muffled voice sounded, and then a huge figure appeared, like an iron tower, and landed on the ground, blocking Chang Yufeng's way. This figure was none other than Yu Ji Wushuang. Chang Yufeng's eyes darkened, and he immediately recognized who this person was. His lips curled up and he said, "A piece of trash and an idiot. You really are brothers. Go to hell." Then, Chang Yufeng growled and slammed out again. This time, it was even more violent than before, and it pressed down on Yu Ji Wushuang. Yu Ji Wushuang, however, was not afraid at all. Like a wild beast, he dashed forward. Bang! Wherever Yu Ji Wushuang went, he smashed Chang Yufeng's palm into pieces. Chang Yufeng's eyes widened. It was obvious that he did not expect Yu Ji Wushuang to be this powerful. He reacted quickly, and with a push of his feet, he retreated. "Chang Yufeng, your time of death has come." But right at this moment, a piercingly cold and low voice resounded, and then a figure flew out like a bolt of lightning. Chapter 25-29. Chapter 25-29. Chapter 25-29. Cowering before the battle, Chang Yufeng suddenly heard an angry roar coming from behind him. At the same time, he felt a violent sword force coming towards him. He could not help but tremble. When he saw clearly that the person behind him was Nie Tian, his expression became even more frightened, and his face instantly turned deathly pale. He didn't expect Nie Tian to catch up so quickly. "Nie Tian, you want to kill me? No way." Chang Yufeng was relatively calm, knowing how strong Nie Tian was. He roared and slammed out with his palm, lifting Zi Zhuxin up and slamming towards Nie Tian. Despicable! Upon seeing this, Nie Tian let out a bellow and withdrew all of his sword intent. A shield of light rose around him, and he morphed into a ball of light that shot towards Zijushin. Chang Yufeng was too shameless. He actually used Zijushin as a shield. Zijushin's body floated in the air, completely out of her control. She felt the enormous pressure in the space, almost crushing her body. At the critical moment, a ball of light appeared and protected her from harm. She instantly steadied herself, and her beautiful eyes flickered. It was obvious that she was quite frightened. Nie Tian's figure arrived in an instant. He scanned Zijushin with his divine sense and asked, "Zijushin, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Zijushin calmed down a little and said with a frightened expression. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He was relieved after confirming that Zijushin was not injured. "Nie Tian, that person ran away." At that moment Yuji Wushuang's voice rang out, pointing at Chang Yufeng. Although his strength was very strong, his speed was not fast, and he could not catch up to Chang Yufeng. With a grim look in his eyes, Nie Tian said, "Yuji Wushuang, you stay here and protect your seventh brother and Zijushin. I'll go after that bastard." With these words, he dashed off in the direction that Chang Yufeng had fled in. Yuji Wushuang was very strong. Among the martial artists who entered the Heaven Ascension realm, only a few were his match. With him here, it would be enough to protect Yu Qingqi and Zijushin. Following which, a pair of astral soul wings appeared on Nie Tian's back. His speed was so fast that it was inconceivable, as he transformed into a streak of light, instantly vanishing from sight. Chang Yufeng knew that he was no match for Nie Tian, and ran for his life. However, after running for hundreds of thousands of meters, he felt a violent sword force appear behind him. His face instantly darkened and he panicked. At the same time, Nie Tian's figure appeared less than 10,000 meters away from Chang Yufeng. In the blink of an eye, he would be able to catch up. "Damn it!" Chang Yufeng let out a low roar. His body suddenly froze, and his aura surged violently. Like a mountain, his body exploded with terrifying power, and he directly threw a palm towards Nie Tian. He knew that he could not escape, so he decided to fight to the death. While Nie Tian was unsteady, he wanted to catch the latter off guard. "You are not that stupid after all." Nie Tian hovered in midair, the astral soul wings on his back spread out, spanning over 1,000 meters. His lips curled into a cold smile as he said, "Unfortunately, your opponent is me." Although his words sounded casual, Nie Tian did not let his guard down. No matter what, Chang Yufeng was a half-step peak-tier cultivator. Under such circumstances, the amount of power he could unleash was terrifying. Kaboom! In the next moment, wherever Chang Yufeng's palm passed through, the giant trees would crumble into pieces, and terrifying cracks would appear on the ground. Annihilation Earth Seal, open! Nie Tian frowned as his lips twitched, and said in a cold tone. Kaboom! As the sound of his voice faded, Chang Yufeng raised his palm, causing the ground in front of him to be lifted up, and a huge mound of earth the size of a mountain appeared before him. Boom! Boom boom boom! Then, the shadow of the palm landed on the mound of earth, causing the earth to crumble and the turbid waves to rise. Chang Yufeng's vision was blocked by the turbid waves in front of him. Die! At that moment, a low growl could be heard, followed by a terrifying shadow of a sword. Boom! The shadow of the sword was like a dragon, breaking through the turbid waves, carrying with it a murderous intent as it headed towards Chang Yufeng. Shit! In that instant, Chang Yufeng sensed that something was amiss and screamed. He wanted to retaliate, but it was too late. Bang! The next moment, a muffled sound could be heard as Chang Yufeng's figure was sent flying, breaking a few giant trees in midair, before landing heavily on a giant boulder. Nie Tian's figure flew out from the turbid waves and landed directly in front of Chang Yufeng. Chang Yufeng's entire body was covered in blood, and his body was trembling as if he could barely stand. He did not expect Nye Tian's strength to be this strong. Just one slash was enough to severely injure him. Nye Tian's gaze was murderous as he stared deadly at Chang Yufeng with murderous intent. In fact, Chang Yufeng was not weak, it was just that he was timid when facing Nye Tian. Perhaps it was because he saw Nye Tian slicing off the skin on Xiang Qingshan's face that he was afraid of Nye Tian. If it was a real battle, it would be impossible for Nye Tian to injure Chang Yufeng with one slash. In a battle between powerhouses, strength was important, but mentality was equally important. Chang Yufeng was afraid before the battle even began. How could he be an opponent of Nye Tian? Nye Tian, you really want to kill me? Chang Yufeng could feel the murderous intent in Nye Tian's eyes as his pupils quivered and his teeth chattered. With a cold smile, Nye Tian walked towards Chang Yufeng step by step. Chang Yufeng, do you really think that I'll let you live after such a long time? With every step he took, the murderous intent on his body intensified. Chang Yufeng's entire body was trembling. The fear in his heart was magnified through his eyes. He was a genius of the 10,000 Mountain sect, and he was still so young. How could he die just like that? Nye Tian, let me tell you something. Don't kill me, okay? Chang Yufeng suddenly thought of something and said with a trembling gaze. That depends on what you're talking about. Nye Tian smiled faintly as the corner of his lips curled up. Nye Tian, if you don't kill me now, I will pretend that nothing happened. Chang Yufeng felt that Nye Tian's murderous intent seemed to have weakened a little. He instantly saw a glimmer of hope and said, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 will soon lose his position as the sect master of the 10,000 Mountain sect. The number 1 sect master, Kuei Mu Jun, has already joined forces with 2 other powerful sects to kill Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Our Chang clan has already submitted to Kuei Mu Jun. My grandfather will soon become the number 1 elder of the main sect. As long as you don't kill me, I guarantee that you will enjoy the best treatment in the 10,000 Mountain sect in the future. Even if you want to become a branch sect master or a main sect elder, it's fine. Chang Yufeng's eyes trembled as he spoke. He hoped that Nye Tian would let him live. This is what you want to tell me? Nye Tian's reaction was surprisingly cold. His eyes were extremely gloomy and cold. You're not interested? Chang Yufeng was startled and his expression froze. Chapter 25:30. A mysterious character. Nye Tian already knew what Chang Yufeng was talking about. Even if he did not know, he had to kill Chang Yufeng. Don't kill me! Chang Yufeng suddenly felt the real killing intent, and actually screamed. His expression was extremely terrified. However, right at that moment, a terrifying force suddenly appeared out of thin air. It arrived at an extremely fast speed and blocked Nye Tian's killing blow in an instant. Nye Tian frowned and his face darkened as he asked coldly, Who is it? He extended his divine sense and scanned his surroundings. Strangely, the surroundings were dead silent and there was no sign of life. This person's life is mine. Just as his face was filled with confusion, a deep voice rang out from the sky. It was extremely powerful and boundless. Nye Tian was taken aback. Then, he growled again, Who's playing tricks? Get the hell out here! As his voice faded away, his body trembled, and his aura suddenly burst out, turning into rolling waves of sword intent, like ripples gushing out. Young man, your sword skills are not bad. Unfortunately, you are not strong enough to force me to show myself. The deep voice rang out again like thunder. In the blink of an eye, Nye Tian felt a terrifying force enveloping him. This force was extremely strange. It was formless and traceless, but it was powerful and terrifying. Nye Tian reacted instantly. Sword intent surged from his body and turned into a shadow of a sword that shot into the sky. Bang! However, in the next moment, a terrifying force appeared and descended upon him, instantly shattering the sword's shadows around him. He was also forced to retreat a few hundred meters before he could stabilize his body. Damn it! Nye Tian let out a bellow as a wisp of blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth. He glanced around with a grim expression, but didn't see anyone. The person who was hiding in the dark was extremely strong. He was at least a half-sage. However, this person did not seem to want to kill Nye Tian. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for Nye Tian to stand. Just who are you? Nye Tian became cold and asked in a deep voice. You don't need to know. That person replied. After which, a strange energy appeared in the air and enveloped Chang Yufeng. Seeing this, Nye Tian frowned and growled, You want to take him away? Impossible. Immediately after, his entire body was filled with sword energy. The starry sky slashed downwards, and a shadow of a sword flew towards Chang Yufeng. Since this person was interested in Chang Yufeng, he would kill Chang Yufeng directly. He did not believe that the other party would not show up. In the void, the majestic voice sounded a little surprised, as if he had not expected Nye Tian to be so strong. In the next moment, a powerful handprint suddenly appeared in the void and directly descended, blocking Nye Tian's sword. Boom! A loud explosion took place in midair. Following this, Nye Tian could feel a powerful pressure approaching him, causing him to retreat rapidly. The other party's strength was much stronger than his. The power unleashed by each attack was enough to severely injure him. This time, Nye Tian's figure retreated 1,000 meters away and stabilized himself in midair. In his vision, a figure in gray robes appeared, blocking in front of Chang Yufeng. The figure looked very old, standing with a hunched back, like a candle flickering in the wind. His body was shrunk inside a loose black robe like a ball. However, the aura around him was magnificent like the mountains and the seas. Judging from his aura, Nye Tian speculated that the person's strength was at least in the half-sage realm. He was curious. Why would a half-sage appear here? Nye Tian clearly remembered that among the cultivators who participated in the path to heaven, the strongest cultivator was only at the peak half-step to the heavenly realm. There was not a single cultivator with the strength of the immortal realm. But now, where did this half-sage come from? Could it be that he was in the heavenly ascension realm? Young man, you only have the strength of a late-stage paramount god, and your sword Dao realm is very ordinary. However, your battle strength is comparable to a peak half-step expert. Your talent is truly amazing. At this moment, the gray-robed cultivator spoke with a hint of praise in his tone. Nye Tian frowned and asked in a deep voice, You're not one of the participants in the path to heaven. Who are you? You don't need to know who I am right now. The gray-robed cultivator spoke in a hoarse voice, then pointed at Chang Yufeng and said, I'm taking this person with me. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and his face sank. He said, What if I don't let you take him with you? Humph. The gray-robed cultivator smiled cold. Young man, I admit that you're not weak. However, it's impossible for you to stop me. Nye Tian's brow furrowed, and a slightly embarrassed expression appeared on his face. Although the gray-robed cultivator's words were belittling him, he knew that he was speaking the truth. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to stop the gray-robed cultivator. As senior, you're one of the participants in the path to heaven, right? At this moment, Chang Yufeng suddenly spoke. He looked at the gray-robed cultivator and said, I'm Chang Yufeng, from the Chang clan of the 10,000 Mountain sect. Chang Kuan is my grandfather. Do you know him? This guy was very quick-witted. He actually got close to the gray-robed cultivator. I know that you're from the Chang clan. That's why you're still alive. The gray-robed cultivator said in a deep voice. Chang Yufeng could tell that there was something wrong with the gray-robed cultivator's tone. He was so scared that his eyes trembled and he didn't dare to speak. Nye Tian frowned and looked at the gray-robed cultivator strangely. If what Chang Yufeng said was true, and the gray-robed cultivator was one of the participants in the path to heaven, then it was very strange. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 said that even a cultivator who stepped into the 9th level of the path to heaven could only stay in the heaven ascension realm for 9 days. However, this gray-robed cultivator had obviously been in the heaven ascension realm for a long time. How did he do it? Why was he able to stay in the heaven ascension realm? Young man, I'm leaving. Just as Nye Tian was confused, the gray-robed cultivator chuckled. He then moved and prepared to leave with Chang Yufeng. However, at that moment, he suddenly stopped. His murky eyes looked at Nye Tian and suddenly lit up as if he had discovered something. His expression was like a beggar who had been starving for 3 days and suddenly saw a table full of delicious food. When Nye Tian saw that the gray-robed cultivator was looking at him strangely, he immediately became alert. The gray-robed cultivator stared at Nye Tian for more than 10 seconds before he finally spoke. He said in a deep voice, "The heaven ascension token you have, who gave it to you?" Nye Tian was startled for a moment before he said, "The heaven ascension token is issued by the sect. Every cultivator who participated in the path to heaven has a heaven ascension token." The heaven ascension token contained the power of the heaven ascension boundary. It allowed cultivators to stay in the heaven ascension boundary for an hour. Everyone who participated in the path to heaven must have a heaven ascension token. Otherwise, they would not be able to resist the powerful pressure of the heaven ascension boundary. Chapter 25:31. Mu Honglun Nye Tian's expression changed when he saw the man's agitated expression. He was puzzled. Why was the man suddenly interested in the heaven ascension token in his hand? The barrier energy in the heaven ascension token had been absorbed the moment he entered the heaven ascension formation. In other words, the heaven ascension token was completely useless now. Therefore, he kept the heaven ascension token on him and did not even store it in his space ring. Who gave you the heaven ascension token personally? The man in gray asked again when he saw that Nye Tian did not speak. This time, he used a threatening tone. The 7th sect leader, Purple Bamboo Mist. Nye Tian frowned and uttered Purple Bamboo Mist's name. Purple Bamboo Mist. The man in gray's eyes widened when he heard the name. His entire body trembled as if he was extremely agitated. Nye Tian was taken aback. He frowned and asked, "You know the sect leader? Kid, give me the heaven ascension token in your hand." The man in gray frowned and said in a cold tone. Nye Tian was puzzled. He did not dare to provoke the man in front of him, so he tossed the heaven ascension token over. "Mist, it's Mist's aura." The gray-robed man received the heaven ascension token with an ecstatic look on his face. He seemed to have gone mad as he shouted loudly. Nye Tian's frown deepened. He thought to himself, "It seems like this man has a special relationship with the sect leader. He can recognize the sect leader's aura from the heaven ascension token." The heaven ascension token was given to Nye Tian by Purple Bamboo Mist. The fact that the man in gray could sense Purple Bamboo Mist's aura from the token meant that he had a special relationship with Purple Bamboo Mist. Something's not right. But in the next moment, Nye Tian frowned as he suddenly thought of something. He sent his divine sense into the heaven ascension token in the gray-robed man's hand and exclaimed, "Lord Sect Leader intentionally left his aura in the heaven ascension token." In an instant, he understood. The reason why the man in gray could sense Purple Bamboo Mist's aura was because the latter had purposely left her aura in the token. If Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist was really just a passing token, its aura would have disappeared long ago. Why would it linger for so long? Then, Nye Tian suddenly thought of something. His eyes suddenly darkened as he looked at the gray-robed man. His expression changed as he said, "I know who you are." The gray-robed man's face darkened as he put away the ascension token. He looked at Nye Tian with a murderous look in his eyes and asked, "Who am I?" "Mu Honglu." Nye Tian's lips twitched as he uttered the name word by word. "Mu Honglu, This was the name Nye Tian had heard before, Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist's husband. On the surface, Purple Bamboo Mist wanted Nye Tian to participate in the path to heaven so that he could bring glory to the seventh sect, but in reality, he wanted to use him to enter the heaven ascension realm and save someone, Mu Honglu. The three Supremes told Nye Tian that Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had imprisoned Mu Honglu in the path to heaven, which was also known as the Heaven Ascension Realm. When Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist obtained the 8 Ascension tokens, she must have injected her aura into the tokens. She might have even injected something else into the tokens. However, Nye Tian did not think too much about it at that time, so he did not notice it at all. Now that he had met Mu Honglu, he finally understood everything. "You really know me." When the gray-clothed man heard Nye Tian say his name, his aged face suddenly changed, and his expression became very complicated. Nye Tian was right. The man in gray was none other than Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist's husband, Mu Honglu. Mu Honglu was not a martial artist who had participated in the path to heaven. He had been imprisoned in the Heaven Ascension realm by Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. He did not expect to receive a message from Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist when he was imprisoned in the Heaven Ascension realm. This was too surprising. "Little brother, what is your relationship with Flowing Mist?" Mu Honglu calmed down and asked. Nye Tian did not hide it and said, "Senior Mu, I am from the 7th sect. Master Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist is the sect leader of the 7th sect. I was ordered by the sect leader to participate in the path to heaven, so I came to the Heaven Ascension realm." The 7th sect. Mu Honglu frowned and said in a low voice, "So Flowing Mist is the sect leader of the 7th sect now. It seems that many things have happened after I was imprisoned by my sworn brother." "Sworn brother?" Nye Tian was stunned when he heard Mu Honglu's words. He asked in surprise, "Senior Mu is the sect leader's sworn brother?" "Yes." Mu Honglu nodded and let out a long sigh. Clearly, he had recalled many things and his expression became complicated. "This..." Nye Tian looked at Mu Honglu and his expression froze. He was speechless. Mu Honglu was Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's sworn brother and Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist's husband. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's biological brother. The relationship between the three should be the closest. However, why would Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 imprison Mu Honglu? Mu Honglu's current state was very strange. His body was bent like a ball, like a man on the brink of death. It was obvious that he was suppressed by some kind of curse, which was why he was in this state. What exactly did he do to make Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 so angry that he imprisoned him in the Heaven Ascension realm? At the same time, Nye Tian was interested to know what Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had left in the Heaven Ascension badge. "Senior Mu, I was actually ordered by the sect leader to rescue you." At that moment, Nye Tian's eyes flickered and he said in a deep voice. Mu Honglu looked at Nye Tian and frowned. "Little brother, don't lie to me. How could I not tell that you were being used? But judging from your reaction, you should know something. I still have to thank you for your kindness. But I won't leave this place." "You won't leave?" Nye Tian frowned and asked in surprise, "Why?" Mu Honglu had been imprisoned here for God knows how long. Now that he had the chance to leave, he actually refused to do so. This was too strange. Could it be that being imprisoned was also addictive? Mu Honglu let out a bitter smile and said, "My sworn brother has treated me well. He has already been very lenient by imprisoning me here. If I escape on my own, it will put him in a difficult position." As he spoke, Mu Honglu let out a magnanimous smile and looked at Nye Tian. "Little brother, please go back and tell Lulan that I'm fine. Tell her not to worry about me, and don't hold any grudges against my sworn brother. As long as the truth of what happened back then is revealed, I will go out and meet her." Nye Tian frowned, a speechless expression on his face. This Mu Honglu was quite interesting. He was clearly imprisoned, but he still spoke up for the person who imprisoned him. This was child's play. He was very curious about what exactly happened back then. Senior Mu, if I may be so bold as to ask, what exactly did you do back then to infuriate the sect leader to the point of imprisoning you? Nie Tian thought for a moment and couldn't help but ask in the end. Sigh. Mu Honglu let out a long sigh after hearing Nie Tian's question and said, Back then, my sworn brother gave me the most important item of the 10,000-layer mountain sect to protect. However, I failed in my duty and caused the sacred item of the sect to be stolen. Speaking of which, I've let my sworn brother down. I've let him down. Nie Tian frowned, confusion filling his face. Chapter 2532. Chapter 2532. Chapter 2532 Forbidden Curse. Nie Tian looked at Mu Honglu with even more doubts in his eyes. However, Mu Honglu did not intend to continue the conversation and said, Little brother, you should leave. I will take this Chong clan's cultivator away and ask him some questions. Nie Tian frowned. Just as he was about to say something, Mu Honglu left with Chong Yufeng in a flash. Little brother, I'm returning your token. Just as Nie Tian was in a daze, Mu Honglu's voice sounded and the Heaven Ascension token flew over. Nie Tian received the token with a puzzled look and murmured, This guy is really interesting. He didn't even look at what's in the token before returning it. Then, Nie Tian probed the token with his divine sense and his expression suddenly changed. Purple bamboo mist had left a large amount of purple bamboo forbidden power in the token. What is the sect leader trying to do by pouring a large amount of purple bamboo forbidden power into the token? Nie Tian murmured with a puzzled look. Then, he suddenly remembered that he still had a Heaven Ascension token with him. He quickly took it out and sensed it. He also discovered that the token contained a very powerful purple bamboo forbidden power. It seemed that purple bamboo mist had poured purple bamboo forbidden power into all 8 of the Heaven Ascension tokens. Nie Tian could not figure out what purple bamboo mist was trying to do. That woman must be trying to use the purple bamboo forbidden power to break the curse in that person's body. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded and said in a deep voice. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he hastily asked, What did you see, little fatty? Fat Cat nodded and said, That person must have been hit by a curse. Judging from his aura, this curse is related to the purple bamboo forbidden power. Maybe she can use the purple bamboo forbidden power to break the curse in his body. So that's how it is. Nie Tian nodded. The purple bamboo forbidden power was the power of the purple bamboo clan's bloodline. Since Mu Honglu was imprisoned by the purple bamboo wolf 7, it was very reasonable that he was under the curse of the purple bamboo forbidden power. Purple bamboo flowing mist had left behind purple bamboo restriction power in the Heaven Ascension token to help Mu Honglu break the curse. Unfortunately, Mu Honglu did not appreciate it. He returned the token to Nie Tian even though he knew that the Ascension token contained the power to break the curse. At this moment, Nie Tian was really curious about what Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had asked Mu Honglu to protect back then. Senior Mu has left, so there's no way to ask. Nie Tian frowned and said with a wry smile, Don't worry about it too much for now. Let's go back and see how Zijushin and the others are doing. In fact, Nie Tian was more worried about Su Qianfan. He didn't know the result of the battle between the latter and Kuemu Jingchen. He didn't stay any longer and hurried back the way he came. After a while, Nie Tian returned to where Zijushin and the others were. Lord Nie Tian, you're back. Please save 7th brother. Yuji Wushuang saw Nie Tian and hurried over, begging. What's wrong with Yu Qingqi? Nie Tian walked over and saw that Yu Qingqi's face was pale and heavily injured. He quickly released the power of the Terra Vein Source to help stabilize the latter's aura. He didn't expect Yu Qingqi to be so heavily injured by Chang Yufeng. Looking at Yu Qingqi's current state, if Nie Tian had come back a little later, his life would have been in danger. Yu Qingqi absorbed the power of the Terra Vein Source. His complexion gradually improved and his aura recovered. Nie Tian took out a few recovery divine pills for Yu Qingqi to consume and said, "You're no longer in danger. You'll probably recover after a few days of rest." "Thank you, Lord Nie Tian." Yu Qingqi hurriedly bowed and thanked sincerely. "Thank you, Lord Nie Tian." Yu Ji Wushuang followed. Nie Tian smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Then, Nie Tian and the others left and rushed to the Black Ice Valley. Soon, they arrived outside the Black Ice Valley. Senior Su. Zi Zhuxin saw Su Qianfan from afar and shouted happily. "Zenair." Su Qianfan was also very happy to see Zi Zhuxin. The two hugged each other, not like martial brothers and sisters, but more like lovers who had reunited after a long time. Cough cough. Nie Tian saw that Su Qianfan was fine and immediately felt relieved. He coughed twice and walked over. Su Qianfan hurriedly separated from Zi Zhuxin. His face was slightly flushed and he said shyly, "Nie Tian, thank you for saving Xian Air this time." "It's nothing." Nie Tian smiled faintly and asked, "Where's Kuei Mu Jingchen?" "He's gone." Su Qianfan nodded slightly and said, "In the battle just now, he and I were both injured. He saw that he couldn't take advantage of us, so he left." Nie Tian nodded and said, "Kuei Mu Jingchen is not simple. His myriad annihilation death seal is very terrifying." "He left because the power of the myriad annihilation death seal in his body has not fully recovered." Su Qianfan nodded and said, "This guy hides his strength deeply. I never found out that he is so strong before." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said nothing more. In his opinion, if Kuei Mu Jingchen was in his peak state, Su Qianfan may not be his opponent. After all, Kuei Mu Jingchen has the fourth seal, and his strongest power is the fourth seal. It's just that he used the fourth seal on Jun Aoqing before, so he has not fully recovered yet. "Nie Tian, this valley is so strange, what's inside?" At this time, Su Qianfan suddenly looked at the valley and asked with a frown. "There is an ancient altar in the valley, and the altar contains a powerful killing array." Nie Tian nodded and said, "The power of the killing array is very strong, everyone must be careful, don't get close to the valley easily." And, hearing Nie Tian's words, Zi Zhuxin nodded her head and said, "This valley is dangerous, let's leave here." Everyone agreed and prepared to leave. "Wait a minute." But Nie Tian spoke at this moment, stopped everyone and said, "Although the valley is dangerous, the altar contains unimaginable power. A friend of mine is in urgent need of the power in the altar, so I can't leave now." "Nie Tian, what are you going to do?" Su Qianfan looked at Nie Tian and felt that the latter's eyes were strange, so he couldn't help asking. "I'm thinking of a way to get the power in the valley." Nie Tian didn't hide and said directly. Su Qianfan frowned and his face froze. In fact, when he tried to explore the valley just now, he was almost injured by the mysterious ice chi. Nie Tian actually wanted to get the power in the valley, this idea was really crazy. Nie Tian didn't say much at this moment, but communicated with Fat Cat and asked, "Fat, before you said that if you want to move the entire valley into the 9 extremes, there is a person who can help, who is that person?" Fat Cat did say so before, but then Kuei Mu Jingchen suddenly came and interrupted him. "Nie Tian, that person is right in front of you." Little Fat Cat's voice rang out as it chuckled. And Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and then looked at Su Qianfan. Chapter 25-33. Wood Sword Intent Su Qianfan. When Nie Tian heard the Fat Cat's voice, he could not help but shout, "Su Qianfan." When Su Qianfan saw Nie Tian looking at him strangely, his expression changed and he asked in surprise, "Nie Tian, what's wrong?" "No, nothing." Nie Tian waved his hand, a puzzled look on his face. He did not understand how Su Qianfan could help. The profound ice altar in the valley had 12 profound ice dragon pillars, and the weight of each pillar was simply unimaginable. With Nie Tian's martial physique, he might be able to lift one of the dragon pillars. As for Su Qianfan, he probably could not lift even one. Su Qianfan's strength was almost on par with Nie Tian's. But in terms of martial physique and true strength, Su Qianfan was definitely weaker than Nie Tian. In fact, Nie Tian felt that in terms of martial physique and strength, Su Qianfan was inferior to Yu Ji Wushuang. Yu Ji had unparalleled divine dual veins, a strong martial physique, and monstrous divine strength. In addition, he had the strength of a half-step peak martial artist, so his true strength must be very shocking. If it was only in terms of strength, without the use of martial techniques or martial techniques, Nie Tian might not be as strong as Yu Ji Wushuang. With Yu Ji Wushuang's strength, he could move one profound ice dragon pillar. But even if Nie Tian and Yu Ji Wushuang attacked at the same time, they could only move 2 profound ice dragon pillars. This was still a long way from 12 profound ice dragon pillars. The profound ice array's 12 profound ice dragon pillars were closely connected and had to be moved at the same time. Otherwise, the altar's array would be destroyed, and no one could say what would happen at that time. If the giant ice dragons in the profound ice dragon pillars woke up, it would definitely be a disaster that would destroy the world. Unless they could find 12 martial artists like Nie Tian or Yu Ji Wushuang, they could not move 12 profound ice dragon pillars at the same time. Su Qianfan's strength is not strong, but his sword will is very special. Fat Cat knew what Nie Tian was thinking. She smiled faintly and explained, "If I'm not wrong, the flexibility in his sword will is very strong. The sword will contains a great amount of vitality, like the grass on the plains, endless and can be accumulated without limit." "What do you mean?" Nie Tian was stunned and his face stiffened. As a swordsman, he actually couldn't understand what Fat Cat was saying. "Nie Tian, let me ask you, how long can you maintain your sword essence after you release it?" Fat Cat chuckled and asked with a strange expression. "About 10 seconds or so." Nie Tian nodded and said, "Generally speaking, after a swordsman released his sword intent, he could not maintain it forever. For example, a sword shadow, even if it was not attacked, it would quickly disappear. Unless the swordsman kept releasing sword essence to maintain the sword shadow. Then let Su Qianfan release a sword shadow and see how long he can maintain it?" Fat smiled again and said. Nie Tian had a strange expression, but he still let Su Qianfan release a sword shadow. Su Qianfan did not know what Nie Tian was going to do, but he still cooperated. His body shook, and a sword will was released, condensing into a sword shadow in the air. Then, a miraculous scene appeared. The sword shadow actually maintained in the air, and did not weaken at all. "How is this possible?" Nie Tian looked for a few minutes to confirm that the sword shadow did not weaken, and could not help but exclaim in shock. Under normal circumstances, it was very good that a sword shadow could last for tens of seconds. But the sword shadow condensed by Su Qianfan's sword essence lasted for a few minutes, and showed no signs of weakening. This was too strange. Nie Tian. Su Qianfan immediately saw through Nie Tian's doubts, and said with a faint smile, "My sword essence is called the Myriad Wood Sword Essence, a wood-attributed sword essence. Although its attack power is not strong, it is very tenacious. Once the sword essence is condensed, it can be maintained for a long time." Nie Tian gulped down a mouthful of saliva and nodded in surprise. As a wood-attributed swordsman, it was not easy for Su Qianfan to have such a strong sword essence. Wood-attributed martial artists were weak among the 9 elemental attribute. In the past, Su Qianfan was on par with Nie Tian in terms of sword essence. Now that he thought about it, it was really terrifying. The most terrifying thing about Su Qianfan's sword essence was that it was extremely condensed. Even after it was released, it could be maintained for a long time without dissipating. Your sword essence is so condensed. Doesn't that mean that you can keep accumulating sword essence and burst out with an unimaginably terrifying sword? Nie Tian asked with a flicker in his eyes as he thought of something. Su Qianfan's sword will did not dissipate, which meant that he could continue to release sword will. In this way, the sword will would continue to merge and condense, and of course it would become stronger and stronger. No one knew how strong it would become in the end. But it was impossible for ordinary swordsmen to keep condensing sword essence, because the sword essence dissipated too quickly. In theory, it's possible, but in reality, it's impossible. Su Qianfan laughed and said, "In a real battle, life and death are often in an instant. Which opponent will give you time to accumulate sword essence?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he could not help but nod. In a battle between experts, life and death was in an instant. Only those who could burst out with great power in an instant could decide the outcome of the battle. Unless Su Qianfan met a fool who stood still and waited for him to accumulate an extremely strong sword essence. However, such a foolish opponent did not exist. Thinking of this, Nie Tian's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he shouted excitedly, "Who said that such a fool does not exist?" The others saw Nie Tian's unusual behavior and were stunned, not knowing what was going on. "Nie Tian, it seems that you've thought it through." Little Fat Cat laughed and said, "This valley is Su Qianfan's opponent, and it's an opponent that won't move at all." "Yes, that's right." Nie Tian was extremely excited, and he nodded heavily. He now completely understood what Fat Cat meant. Su Qianfan's sword essence could always be condensed and would not dissipate. Then, as long as Su Qianfan's sword essence seeped into the valley, and then slowly accumulated sword essence, as long as Su Qianfan was given enough time, his sword essence would definitely be condensed to be strong enough to directly move the entire valley. Even if the 12 black ice dragon pillars were huge, they could still be lifted by the endless wood sword essence. Su Qianfan was probably the only one who could do such a thing, and no one else could. Even a demi-saint or a pseudo-saint would not be realistic if they wanted to lift the entire valley, since they could not burst out with such great power in an instant. "What are you thinking, Nie Tian?" Su Qianfan could not help but ask, puzzled as he watched Nie Tian's expression change again and again. "Su Qianfan, it's up to you whether we succeed this time." Nie Tian laughed heartily, his eyes shining as he looked at Su Qianfan, appearing very excited. "What do you mean?" Su Qianfan was completely baffled, not understanding what Nie Tian was so happy about. Then, Nie Tian calmed down a little and explained his plan. "Well..." Everyone inhaled sharply at Nie Tian's words, unable to say a word for a long time. Who could have imagined that Nie Tian would come up with such a crazy idea, to have Su Qianfan lift the entire valley with his sword essence? "Don't worry, it will definitely work," Nie Tian said excitedly, brimming with confidence. "Roar!" That was when a deep roar suddenly echoed from within the valley, powerful and distant, vast and boundless. Chapter 25:34. Returning of 10,000 Wood. Suddenly hearing a deep roar coming from the valley, Nie Tian's heart sank and his expression changed. What is that sound?" Yu Qingqi's eyes trembled when he heard the sound. The sound was too strange. It was deep and boundless, making one's heart tremble. The others also had grim expressions on their faces as they turned to look at Nie Tian. "I don't know what that sound is either," Nie Tian said, forcing himself to calm down. He couldn't be sure if the sound came from the dragon in the ice pillars. The roar just now sounded like a dragon's roar, but it was ethereal, as if it was an illusion. Nie Tian didn't dare to act rashly and just stood where he was. After a while, the valley became quiet again, as if nothing had happened. That's strange." Nie Tian frowned and calmed down. He glanced at the crowd and said, "Stay here, I'll go into the valley to take a look." "Nie Tian, be careful," Su Qianfan nodded and warned. Although he didn't know what was in the valley, he could infer from Nie Tian's expression that there must be something terrifying inside. "Su Qianfan, no matter what happens, don't go near the valley, understand?" Nie Tian was worried and looked at Su Qianfan. Not only were there ice pillars in the valley, but there was also a killing array. Su Qianfan and the others didn't know anything about killing arrays. If they went near the valley, they would only trigger the killing array and make the situation more dangerous. Yes. Su Qianfan nodded. Nie Tian didn't hesitate and walked into the valley. He was very careful and cautious, not daring to be careless. Following the diagram, he came to the entrance of the valley, but he didn't go in directly. Instead, he spread out his divine sense and sensed the valley. After carefully sensing, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown. He found that there was no movement or aura in the valley. Nothing had changed from before. Then, he finally couldn't help but step into the valley. Wherever his gaze passed, everything remained the same. Strange, what's going on? Nie Tian's brows furrowed even tighter, his face filled with confusion. He clearly heard a deep dragon roar, but the 12 profound ice dragon pillars in front of him did not change at all. Nie Tian was still not at ease. He once again sensed the 12 profound ice dragon pillars, but still did not find any abnormalities. Sigh. This is really strange. Nie Tian was stunned for a long time. In the end, he couldn't help but laugh. Since everything has returned to normal, let's proceed with the original plan, Nie Tian said and walked out of the valley. Nie Tian, what happened in the valley? When the others saw Nie Tian return, they asked one after another. Nie Tian laughed and said, "Nothing happened." This. Everyone was speechless. I know you want to see what's inside the valley. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I will now transmit a formation map to you. Follow the formation map and enter the valley with me. With that, Nie Tian released a few wisps of divine sense and passed it to everyone present. After everyone received the formation map, they followed behind Nie Tian and slowly entered the valley. When they entered the valley and saw the shocking scene in the valley, everyone was dumbfounded and could not react for a long time. After a while, when everyone had calmed down, Nie Tian said with a smile, Let's leave the valley first. Everyone was reluctant, but they still slowly left the valley and returned to the safe zone. Nie Tian, you want to move the entire formation in the valley to another place, right? Su Qianfan looked at Nie Tian, unable to conceal the shock in his heart, his eyes dark as he asked. He had heard Nie Tian mention it earlier, but he did not expect that the valley that Nie Tian wanted to move would be so shocking. To be honest, he was not confident that he could accumulate enough sword intent to move the entire valley. Su Qianfan, don't worry. I will help you from the side. Nie Tian knew that Su Qianfan was worried. He smiled faintly and said, As long as you can lift the entire valley by a few meters, I can move the valley into the 9 extremes. Okay. Su Qianfan saw that Nie Tian was so calm, he nodded and said, I will try my best. Nie Tian looked at Su Qianfan and nodded heavily. Next, Su Qianfan began to restore his strength. The battle with Kuemu Jingchen had consumed a lot of his strength, and he urgently needed to recover. Nie Tian also had something to do. He must expand the 9 extremes. The 9 extremes world was not big, and it was obviously a bit difficult to move it into a valley with a radius of tens of thousands of meters. However, with Nie Tian's current strength, he was very proficient in controlling the boundaries of the universe. Moreover, he was expanding the 9 extremes on the basis of the 9 extremes, so it would not be very troublesome. If he was given 3 days, he could expand the 9 extremes about twice. Next, a day later, Su Qianfan's strength was almost restored, and he began to condense. Lin Yufeng appeared in his hand, and his whole body was constantly releasing sword intent, like a moisturizing rain, slowly seeping into the ground and extending into the valley. Boom, 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 boom. Under the impact of his sword intent, there was a strange sound coming from the ground. This was caused by his sword intent, which affected the structure of the earth veins. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Nie Tian had succeeded in expanding the 9 extremes more than twice, and Su Qianfan had been accumulating sword intent for 2 days. The myriad wood sword intent is really powerful. When Nie Tian came out of the valley, he sensed that the sword intent of all wood had accumulated to a great extent. The enormous sword intent was like an invisible giant hand that reached deep into the valley, as if it could lift the entire valley in the next moment. Nie Tian, my sword intent can only go this far, the rest is up to you. However, at this time, Su Qianfan was already at his limit. Large beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, and his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. He looked at Nie Tian and spoke with difficulty. All right. Nie Tian smiled lightly, and then began to feel the direction of the sword intent in the valley, and began to release the vast power of the stars. Boom! The power of the stars flowed along the sword intent, surging under the valley, and a powerful force erupted, instantly increasing the power of the sword intent by several times. Nie Tian knew that with Su Qianfan's strength alone, even if he exhausted all his sword intent, he would not be able to lift the entire valley. Therefore, at this moment, he released the power of the stars, and stimulated the myriad wood sword intent to explode with even more terrifying power. Moments later, the myriad wood sword intent, under the stimulation of the power of the stars, reached its peak. Su Qianfan, now is the time. Nie Tian looked at Su Qianfan and said in a deep voice, Su Qianfan nodded heavily, and his body rose from the ground. He shouted in a low voice, Myriad wood sword art, the final form, myriad wood sky. In the next instant, the myriad wood sword intent hidden deep under the valley suddenly erupted. Crack, crack, crack. Countless giant tree roots suddenly drilled out of the ground, spreading over an area of tens of thousands of meters, surrounding the entire valley. Boom! Then, the ground suddenly cracked, and then a loud boom sounded. Chapter 25-35. Frost Dragon Ball Boom. Rumble. Following that, an even more violent sound was heard as the entire valley rose slowly. The ground was torn apart and the heavens and earth seemed to be trembling. So powerful! Yu Qingqi and the others were dumbfounded by the shocking scene in front of them. It was unimaginable that Su Qianfan could unleash such a terrifying force after accumulating his sword intent. Nie Tian. Su Qianfan yelled and looked at Nie Tian. The force that he was enduring was too powerful. The 12 mystic ice dragon pillars and the huge mound of earth with a radius of tens of thousands of meters were putting a great pressure on his martial physique. He could only maintain this state for a few seconds at most. If Nie Tian could not move the valley into the 9 extremities in a few seconds, then everything would be in vain. Nie Tian agreed. Without another word, he flew into the sky and took out the 9 extremities. With a thought, he activated the 9 extremities to unleash the power of time and space. Roar! However, at that moment, a deep roar rang out from the floating valley once again. What's going on? Nie Tian suddenly heard a deep roar that sounded like a dragon's roar. His expression suddenly changed, and he was extremely shocked. A few days ago, he had heard a roar that was exactly the same as the one he was hearing now. This low roar was 70% similar to the roar of a dragon, but it was also somewhat illusory, giving off a feeling of unreality. For a moment, Nie Tian was stunned. Nie Tian! Su Qianfan yelled as he felt that he could not take it anymore. Nie Tian came back to his senses. Without thinking too much, he activated the 9 extremities to unleash the power of time and space, which enveloped the entire valley. Bang! The next moment, the sky trembled slightly and the entire valley disappeared into the 9 extremities. The others were extremely shocked when they saw this. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that such a terrifying technique existed in the world. Such a huge valley had disappeared just like that. When Nie Tian saw that the valley had already disappeared, he did not dare to relax in the slightest. His figure moved and he directly entered the 9 extremities. He had to figure out what was going on with that deep roar. After entering the 9 extremities, Nie Tian's figure flashed, and he impatiently charged towards the Black Ice Valley. However, no matter how anxious he was, his speed was still not fast. Even though he had moved the entire valley into the 9 extremities, the killing array in the valley was still there, so he had to be cautious. Once again entering the valley, Nie Tian's spiritual sense spread out and carefully perceived everything in the valley. But what surprised him was that he still couldn't sense anything. Everything was the same as before, as if that low roar was just an illusion. How is this possible? Nie Tian frowned, his face as gloomy as water. Of course, he knew that the low roar just now was definitely not an illusion. Nie Tian, go up along the Black Ice Dragon pillars and see if you can find anything. At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded and said to Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned, then nodded. The 12 Black Ice Dragon pillars were hundreds of thousands of meters tall, and Nie Tian could not see the top. If there was really something strange, it should be at the top of the dragon pillars. His figure moved, and he slowly ascended along one of the Black Ice Dragon pillars. Not long after, he arrived at the top of the Black Ice Dragon pillar. What's this? Nie Tian's figure stabilized, and he could not help but frown when he saw a white ball of frost floating on the dragon pillar. His face was filled with doubt. That white ball of frost was not very big, only the size of an adult's fist, and it was flowing with frost chi. The icy aura was extremely strong. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, then calmed down, his eyes staring at that ball of frost. At this moment, he suddenly discovered that the shadow of a dragon had appeared within the ice sphere. It was extremely small and exquisite. What was even more strange was that the exquisite dragon shadow was actually swimming, like a small fish swimming in a small puddle. Could this be the legendary Frost Dragon Ball? At this time, Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded, exclaiming, "Frost Dragon Ball? What's that?" Hearing Fat Cat's voice, Nie Tian frowned, stunned on the spot. He had never heard of the Frost Dragon Ball. In the next moment, Fat Cat seemed to suddenly understand something, and let out a strange cry, looking very happy. Nie Tian was stunned again, looked at Fat Cat and asked, "Fat, what did you find?" Looking at the excited expression on Fat Cat's face, it seemed that he had found something incredible. Nie Tian, I know, the dragon imprisoned in the 12 mystical ice dragon pillars is a frost dragon. Fat Cat spoke again, his face full of joy. Nie Tian frowned, waiting for Fat Cat to continue. He was very surprised that the dragon imprisoned in the mystical ice dragon pillars was actually a dragon. He really could not imagine how terrifying the strength of such a huge creature would be. The Frost Dragon is one of the 5 great ancestral dragons of the ancient era. Its draconic energy is overwhelming and extremely powerful. Fat Cat continued to explain, "It is said that an adult frost dragon can fight the strongest sage. So powerful." Nie Tian could not help but be shocked when he heard Fat's words. The strength of the golden dragon at its peak was only equivalent to that of a human pseudo-sage. However, the frost dragon could fight against the strongest sages. The gap between a pseudo-sage and the strongest sage was imaginable. From this, it could be seen that the golden dragon and the frost dragon were not on the same level. "Fat, what is this ball of frost?" Nie Tian continued to ask after understanding the frost dragon. "This ball of frost is called the Frost Dragon Pearl," Fat Cat said. Little Fat Cat's expression was solemn as it explained, "The dragon shadow you see in the dragon pearl is actually the great frost dragon's dragon soul, and this ball of frost is the dragon chi unique to the great frost dragon, the frost dragon chi. I guess that the function of the mystical ice dragon pillars is not only to imprison the frost dragon, but also to slowly force out the frost dragon's soul and dragon energy to form the frost dragon pearl. The frost dragon pearl contains a very strong power of frost, which is the favorite food of the mystical ice giants. After listening to Fat Cat, Nye Tian was stunned and speechless for a long time. The mystical ice giants were too terrifying. They actually caught the frost dragon and forced out the frost dragon's soul and dragon energy to form the frost dragon pearl, and then fed on it. The frost dragon was already an existence that Nye Tian could not imagine. The fact that the mystical ice giants were stronger than the frost dragon shocked him even more. Nye Tian, the 2 dragon roars we heard just now should have come from the frost dragon pearl. Fat Cat nodded and said solemnly. Nye Tian also nodded as he came to a realization. Chapter 25:36. Chapter 25:36. Chapter 25:36 Mu Honglio's transformation. Fat, what's the use of the frost dragon ball? Nye Tian couldn't help but stare at the frost dragon ball and ask after understanding everything. Of course it's useful. Fat Cat let out a strange cry and said excitedly, the Frost Dragon Ball is made from the fusion of the Frost Dragon's Dragon Soul and Dragon Chi. Contains a very terrifying power of ice. It's no exaggeration to say that as long as that wing race kid can absorb the Frost Dragon Chi of one Frost Dragon Ball, it will be enough for him to grow a second pair of Frost Demon wings. When Nye Tian heard Fat Cat's words, his eyes couldn't help but tremble and he said in horror, the Frost Dragon Ball is so abnormal. Of course. Fat Cat chuckled and was very proud. Nye Tian frowned and asked, Fat, if EMO absorbs the Dragon Chi in the Frost Dragon Ball, will the Dragon Soul in the Dragon Ball be damaged? It won't. Fat Cat smiled confidently and said, what that wing race kid needs is the power of ice. The Frost Dragon Chi is enough for him. The Frost Dragon Soul is useless to him. That's good. Nye Tian let out a long breath and was much more relieved. If he had to kill a frost dragon for Emo's pair of wings, it was not worth it. Then, without hesitation, Nye Tian directly took out a frost dragon ball, carefully wrapped it in sword chi, and came to Emo's side. Nye Tian, what are you doing? Nye Qingwan looked at Nye Tian with a horrified expression and said, you've made it colder and colder here. I can't stand it anymore. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, little girl, you've got to hang in there. If you leave the 9 superbs, EMO will have to live in solitude alone. Nye Qingwan was speechless. She stared at Nye Tian and asked, Nye Tian, what are you going to do to Little Ice? Of course it's to help him. Nye Tian laughed and raised his arm. The Frost Dragon Pearl flew directly towards the demonic frost cocoon in the sky. In the next moment, the Frost Dragon Pearl stopped in midair and began to release cold and surging Frost Dragon Chi. The cold fiend demon cocoon was like a bottomless pit that absorbed cold energy, crazily absorbing the cold Frost Dragon energy. Nye Tian watched from the side for a while. After confirming that there were no abnormalities, he laughed and said to Nye Qingwan, Qingwan, I'll leave this place to you. I'll go out first. Nye Tian, when will the little ice cube wake up? Nye Qingwan saw that Nye Tian was about to leave and quickly asked, can't you communicate with him? Why don't you ask him yourself? With a smile, Nye Tian vanished into thin air. As long as there was enough power of ice, EMO would be able to grow a second pair of wings and wake up soon. After leaving the 9 extreme worlds, Nye Tian's figure descended. In front of him, what used to be a valley had become a huge pit. Nye Tian. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out, filled with panic. Su Qianfan. Nye Tian was stunned. He saw Su Qianfan sitting under a huge tree, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. He was seriously injured. He looked again. At this moment, there was only Su Qianfan around. The others were gone. Su Qianfan, what happened? Nye Tian stepped forward and came in front of Su Qianfan. He released the power of the Terra Vein Source and poured it into Su Qianfan's body. Nye Tian, they've been taken away. Su Qianfan's face turned slightly better and he said anxiously. Taken away? Nye Tian's face darkened and he said in surprise, taken away by who? He never thought that such a big thing would happen outside in the short time he entered the Nine Extreme world. A hunchbacked gray-robed martial artist, Su Qianfan said as he struggled to stand up. Nie Tian frowned. The next moment, his eyes trembled as he thought of a person. He said in a trembling voice, Mu Honglu. Su Qianfan said that the others had been taken away by a hunchbacked gray-robed martial artist. Who else could it be other than Mu Honglu? Mu Honglu. Su Qianfan had obviously heard of this name. His eyes trembled and he said in shock, That hunchbacked old man is Lord Mu Honglu? Yes. Nie Tian nodded heavily. Without explaining anything, he said, Su Qianfan, where did Senior Mu go? Su Qianfan frowned and said, Lord Mu Honglu said that he would come and find you. Nie Tian furrowed his eyebrows and looked very embarrassed. He did not know what Mu Honglu was doing. Previously, Nie Tian had tried to persuade him nicely and was even willing to take him away. However, he had rejected him. Now, he had taken Zijushin and the others. At that moment, Nie Tian suddenly realized something. His face darkened and he thought to himself, could it be that Mu Honglu has realized something and wants to leave the heaven-ascending realm? Mu Honglu had taken Zijushin, Yu Qingqi, and Yu Ji Wushuang, but he had not taken Su Qianfan. Zijushin and the other two had participated in the path to heaven on behalf of the seventh sect, so they all had heaven-ascending tokens left behind by Purple Bamboo Lulan. Mu Honglu had not taken Zijushin and the other two to kill them. He only wanted their heaven-ascending tokens. The heaven-ascending tokens contained the Purple Bamboo restriction power left behind by Purple Bamboo Lulan. It could help Mu Honglu break through the restriction power curse. Alright. We'll wait here then. Nie Tian immediately calmed down and said solemnly. Nie Tian, you said that the hunchbacked martial artist was Lord Mu Honglu. What's going on? Su Qianfan looked at Nie Tian and could not help but ask. Nie Tian didn't hold anything back, and told her everything about Mu Honglu. He even told her about how Purple Bamboo Mist had used him. Seventh sect leader, she. Su Qianfan was shocked after hearing Nie Tian's story. He did not know what to say. At that moment, Nie Tian's expression changed slightly, and his lips curled into a strange smile. He's here. In the next moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Nie Tian and Su Qianfan. It was Mu Honglu. However, Mu Honglu's body had changed greatly. He was no longer as hunchbacked as before, and his appearance had become much younger. He was no longer as old as before. Senior Mu, it seems like you've thought it through. When Nie Tian saw the changes in Mu Honglu's body, he knew that the latter had absorbed the Purple Bamboo restriction power in the Heaven Ascending token and was trying to break through the restriction power in his body. However, it seemed like Mu Honglu had not completely broken through the restriction power in his body. Since Mu Honglu was willing to break through the restriction power in his body, it meant that he had thought it through and wanted to leave the Heaven Ascending realm. Brat, give me your Heaven Ascending token. Mu Honglu's reaction was extremely cold and even a little angry as he said coldly. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He did not know why Mu Honglu would have such an attitude. However, he did not hesitate to take out the Heaven Ascending token and tossed it to Mu Honglu. Great! Mu Honglu caught the Heaven Ascending token and said with a smile, I'll be able to leave this place after absorbing the Purple Bamboo restriction power in this token. Purple Bamboo Lulan, I want to ask you in person what exactly happened in the past. Chapter 2537. A little more. Nie Tian frowned and was confused when he saw Mu Honglu's reaction. From the looks of it, Mu Honglu seemed to hate Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 very much. However, Mu Honglu did not treat Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 like this not long ago. At that time, he respected Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 very much and trusted him. However, it seemed like Mu Honglu's attitude toward Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had taken a 180-degree turn from respect to hatred. What happened? Nie Tian frowned and thought to himself, did Chang Yufeng say something to Mu Honglu? At that moment, Nie Tian realized that Chang Yufeng was not beside Mu Honglu. Previously, Mu Honglu had clearly snatched Chang Yufeng away from his hands. Seeing how furious Mu Honglu was, Nie Tian didn't dare to disturb him, and could only watch from the side. Meanwhile, Mu Honglu had absorbed the forbidden force of the purple bamboo from the Heaven Ascending badge, and his condition improved slightly. His body had straightened up. Although he still looked a little old, he looked much better than before. However, the anger in his eyes was even more intense, as if he wanted to devour someone alive. Senior Mu, what's going on? Did Chang Yufeng tell you something? Nie Tian asked nervously, afraid that Mu Honglu would do something out of line. The kid from the Chang clan told me a lot of things, which helped me solve the mystery that had been bothering me for many years. Mu Honglu said in a deep voice. His body was trembling slightly due to his anger. What did Chang Yufeng say? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at Chang Yufeng. I now know who has stolen the thing that I was protecting. Mu Honglu did not explain too much, but said in a deep voice. By whom? Nie Tian and Su Qianfan's eyes grew grim at the same time as they asked simultaneously. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Mu Honglu said in a cold tone, his eyes almost spitting fire. When Nie Tian heard Mu Honglu's words, his face froze and he was speechless. Wasn't Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 the one that Su Qianfan was guarding? How did the person who stole that thing suddenly become Purple Bamboo Wolf 7? Impossible! Su Qianfan's voice suddenly rang out and he shouted, Teacher would never do such a thing. He had heard a lot about Mu Honglu. He knew that Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had imprisoned Mu Honglu all those years ago because Mu Honglu had failed in his duty and failed to protect what he should protect. But now, Mu Honglu actually said that the Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was a thief. How could Su Qianfan not be angry? So you are the disciple of Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Mu Honglu's face suddenly darkened. He stared at Su Qianfan coldly and said, Brat, you have no idea that your teacher is a hypocrite. Nonsense! Su Qianfan roared. His aura suddenly fluctuated. He wanted to attack Mu Honglu. Upon seeing this, Nie Tian quickly moved to stop Su Qianfan. Mu Honglu's strength was very strong, and Su Qianfan was not his match. If Su Qianfan attacked recklessly, he would be the one to suffer. Senior Mu, calm down. Things may not be what you think. Nie Tian did not know what Chang Yufeng had said to Mu Honglu. He could only say, if you have any doubts about the sect leader, we can find him and confront him. Confront him? Mu Honglu sneered and said, I'm afraid that if I escape from the Heaven Ascension realm, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 will give the order to kill me. If I confront him, won't I be walking right into a trap? This. Nie Tian frowned and was momentarily speechless. Mu Honglu, where are my junior sister and the others? At this moment, Su Qianfan suddenly realized something and asked in shock. Don't worry, they are not dead. Mu Honglu smiled coldly. The Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's face was extremely cold. Then, with a wave of his hand, the void trembled slightly and 3 figures appeared. It was Zi Zhuxin and the other 2. Senior brother Su. Zi Zhuxin was overjoyed to see Su Qianfan again, as if she had just survived a disaster. Yu Qingqi, Yu Ji, and Wu Shuang were also overjoyed and instantly came to Nie Tian's side. Zi Zhuxin and the other 2 were fine. Mu Honglu did not make things difficult for them and only asked for their Heaven Ascension token. Kid, when are you leaving the Heaven Ascension realm? At this moment, Mu Honglu suddenly looked at Nie Tian and asked. Nie Tian thought for a moment and said, 4 to 5 days left. Apart from Yu Qingqi, Nie Tian and the others had all stepped onto the Heaven Ascension platform's heaven stairway and could stay in the Heaven Ascension realm for 9 days. They had already been in the Heaven Ascension realm for 4 days, so there were only 4 to 5 days left. Very well, I will wait for you and leave the Heaven Ascension realm with you, Mu Honglu said in a deep voice, his eyes surging with a cold light. All right, Nye Tian said with a faint smile. Not only did he not refuse, he actually welcomed them. Considering Mu Honglu's current state, if he left now, he might do something impulsive. Therefore, he decided to let him stay for a few days to calm down. Next, Nye Tian and the others began to work on their cultivation. The god power in the Heaven Ascension realm was much stronger than in the outside world, which made it very beneficial to work on cultivation. Nye Tian could sense that he was on the verge of breaking through to the peak paramount god level. He had already consumed the rainbow dew and absorbed a huge amount of power. Considering the environment in the Heaven Ascension realm, it wasn't surprising that he was close to breaking through. In the blink of an eye, 4 days passed. When Nye Tian awoke from his cultivation and sensed his aura, he sighed and murmured, just a little bit off. After 4 or 5 days of cultivation, his aura had grown much stronger, but he still hadn't broken through to the peak paramount god level. Nye Tian, your talent is very shocking. Among all the martial artists I've seen, you're definitely number one in terms of martial talent, Mu Honglu said in a deep voice as he looked at Nye Tian. Although he had calmed down a lot, the anger in his eyes hadn't changed. Su Qianfan and the others rose to their feet, all of them feeling slightly stronger than before. However, compared to Nye Tian, they were still a far cry. Nye Tian, let's get ready to leave, Su Qianfan said, nodding at Nye Tian. Yu Qingqi had already left 3 days ago. And now, it was time for Nye Tian and the others to leave as well. All right. Nye Tian nodded, then looked at Mu Honglu and asked, Senior Mu, are you ready? I'm ready, Mu Honglu said with an unsightly expression on his face. Next, Nye Tian reached out to sense the repulsive force in the air. Slowly, the repulsive force in the air began to condense and circulate around their bodies. A moment later, Nye Tian felt that the repulsive force was strong enough, so he nodded and took a step forward.